Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 609er. 609. This is for September 18th. A fun show tonight. It's going to be a good show because I'm pretty much not going to be in it. We're going live to Southern California, which we'll do just a second. It's the NWA Annual Meeting, National Weather Association. And we should mention this is the pre-show. This is not the regular beginning of the show. This is the time where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we occasionally say outrageous.
Testing.
So let's go live to Anaheim.
Can you hear me, James?
Loud and clear.
Okay, how about Rick?
Hello, can you hear me?
Can
Loud
you hear
and
Rick?
clear.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bill?
Testing 1 2 3. Hello, James.
Okay. Here,
Good.
Bill?
You might feed me a smidgen more audio down those guys' channels, just a little more.
Okay.
Just a slight bit more.
Just a slight bit more. All right.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
Yeah, bring them up a little bit. This is what you call high-tech
1 2 3.
radio right here, ladies and gentlemen.
Testing 1 2 3.
Okay, I've gone up and
That's good. That's good.
is that good for Bill?
Testing 1 2 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, he'll go back to
Good.
microphone 3. Try it again on that one. Is that
Testing 1 2 3. Microphone 3 says
That's
hello,
good.
James.
We're good.
one? Okay. Rick?
We're good.
All right.
Test,
Fabulous.
test, 1 2 3.
We're good.
This is Test Brains.
Test brains, ladies and gentlemen. Yes.
Is there latency in there, James?
Not really.
Okay. Okay.
Not,
Just being sure.
I think we're good. So this is kind of you guys will just kind of take the show. We do have the recorded segments that I'll do here, and this is y'all's program. I'm the button puncher producer, behind the scenes guy today.
I couldn't hear it on my right one, but I heard it on the left.
It may be because we're splitting it.
Mine's not spoken.
And I have no idea how Brian is doing
that
this,
means
but
only one
he's got
person
this
is gonna
total
hear
thing
on
under
the-
control here.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Brian, that
To-
may be a problem. If they're only hearing on one side.
Well, I don't know. I don't yeah.
I'm going to mute you guys for 1 second. Just so you will know, we are doing this as Hurricane Maria is been upgraded to a Category 5 in the Atlantic. Let me pull up the latest data here. Again, this is all kind of happening as we're doing the show. We have a lot of things going on here. And the tropics will obviously be a big topic. But no, I've been following the NWA hashtag. I think it's NWAS17. Yeah, top winds with Maria are now at 160 with a central pressure of 924. Wow. This thing is going pretty much over Dominica. Here's the, let's see, it is now 5 miles southeast of Dominica. Wow. The eye is basically going right over that small island in the leewards. That's just horrible. Top winds 160. Pressure 924. Wow. That is just tough. And this will be going over Puerto Rico Wednesday. And there are a lot of moving parts to this, but this obviously is a major story, so we'll talk about that. And again, we're doing the show here September the 18th. But hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, you probably are watching live. Most people that listen don't hear the pre-show. Goodness gracious. It's just been too quiet for too long. This had to break loose. All right, Brian, unmute, man. Let's go back to you live in Anaheim. And Brian maybe stepped away. But I'm trying to think who all is there. Obviously, we've got 3 there. We have Brian Peters, Bill Murray, and Rick Smith.
I didn't step away.
Oh, okay. And I see Rick with his camera there.
This one needs to be the one that someone shares.
And Brian's got a wide shot here. See, I'll be like a director guy here. I'll just be punching up camera shots. It's kind of exciting.
You should be able to see Rick and Bill.
Yeah, I've got Rick, and I guess we're just going to mute Rick's audio, right? Since the audio's coming down your channel, Brian.
Yes.
I muted.
Yeah,
He muted it.
Yeah, we're going to take the audio strictly off of Brian's. We see Brian and Rick and Bill. So what other weather brain is there? Aubrey was there yesterday. I guess she went. Did she go home today?
I didn't see her.
She got within about 30 miles of here. She was on the Hollywood Walk of Fame last time I saw her.
Well, I thought she was out there and just went over to Los Angeles doing a tourist thing or something.
No, she was on a totally separate trip, vacation or something. So
Yeah.
we tried to get her to come by,
But she snubbed us.
that's right.
Okay.
So Kim is here somewhere.
Okay, cool. Kevin is out, and basically you guys have the whole show here. So hopefully you'll carouse up some good guests and talk about the things that you have learned.
Had a
It's always
great
fun
talk.
to follow the hashtag from a distance, watching on Twitter here. And Brian, the hat was really special. Wearing that Swami hat, man.
Oh, wasn't it though? That really was.
It works. It works well for you. I mean, it's a good look for you. I don't know if it worked for me, but it looks good on you.
Oh, I think you'd look excellent in the hat. I really do.
So
I know.
where are
Over
you?
whose dead body will you wear it?
No, look. We had $13,000 offered for our news anchor to wear a Captain Crunch outfit. I'd wear that in a heartbeat for $13,000. That is easy
Sign
money.
me up. Sign me
I'd
up.
wear that Swami hat. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask Bill for a raise then, huh?
Yeah. But what I'll do here when we start, I'm just going to kind of toss to you guys, and y'all take it, and I'll play the recorded segments before I go into do TV. Y'all know Maria's been upgraded to a 5. I guess y'all saw that.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Glad I'm not in Puerto Rico.
Oh my goodness.
It's right over Dominica, and there's a radar facility on Martinique,
135 knots or higher.
and
It's 160 miles an hour.
Yeah, so that's 135 knots.
Ouch.
it's
Drops-
nasty.
There was a drop sonde in there recently. It had 190 at
Flight level one.
at flight level.
But still, that's 170.
Yeah, it's a beast.
Oh my goodness.
So somebody named Brian Peters just tweeted me a picture over San Francisco. Is that you, Brian? Is this some imposter?
That's the fake. Brian
Yes,
Peters.
that's an imposter. I mean, because the only
It-
one I know
it's-
is right here.
Oh, it's Bryan. It
Ah.
says, I'm into outdoorsy stuff like drinks on the patio. That's his
Sunsets
profile.
and walks on the
description.
beach.
Yeah, I was trying to talk Rick into buying me a drink, but he wouldn't do it.
Brian was drinking bourbon earlier, James. Don't let him kid you.
Wow. Some stuff we don't need to know about. Brian, did you take your pants off one of the sessions today?
No.
Good.
We did have a
That's
couple other
good.
people that we arrested, but not Brian. I have $15,000 in my wallet to get him out of jail. James.
Yeah. Bill told me that you gave him the credit card up to $15,000 to bail me out if I got arrested.
Is that,
Wow.
is that offer still good, James, or does it expire?
I think it expired at 3:00 this afternoon. So sorry.
Okay, you're on your own now for karaoke tonight, Brian.
So let me see. You've called me expendable and you've expired me. I'm really getting up there.
Brian. Are you doing karaoke tonight, Brian?
I wasn't planning on it.
I think you should.
We'll see how this goes. Look at the crowd at the door.
So is Tony Rice out there?
No, unfortunately. No, Tony.
He sent an audio file, so I've got.
Yeah, we need 2 recorded segments. Did Brian send a rerun?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I didn't hear you, Brian, when you spoke.
And I'm hearing some talk back from some channel somewhere out there.
I think it's Rick's iPad. Okay, now try.
Okay.
I think now
Rick
it's
said
gone,
he
it's gone
muted.
away. Yeah. There was a tiny bit coming out. Here comes
Yeah,
Kim
it's funny.
Cloco.
Where you want?
Kim just got here.
Let's pick Kim right here. Do you mind sharing earbuds, Kim? If you do, I'll
I'm
take
okay
your
with that.
Do
position.
we have
That
a
is
earbud we're
nasty,
not
man. What's the
using?
matter with you sharing
You just
earbuds?
put-
We only have so many
Earwax?
slots
Because we only have
Oh.
4. We only have
Peters
4
only has
connections.
4 slots.
Oh,
We
man, that
need-
is just gross.
So we split one of them into 5. Don't tell Kim it's gross.
Well, it's not gross. It's nasty. There's a big difference. I mean, that's just nasty.
It's not nasty, James.
You can say that from afar.
We
but
have little
to
earbud
improvise
condoms
in
on
the field.
earbuds.
Oh, earbud condoms. That's our show title for the week.
I refuse to put that in the show title.
You know, we'll lose our PG rating on iTunes.
That's true.
You have a microphone right there, dear, and some earbuds that you
So
don't
I
have to
can
share with
use
anybody yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet. At some point, you'll have to. If you get tired of that, I'll share.
Okay, great.
I'm not.
Very close.
I'm not.
I
picky.
think that this is the best setup we've ever had, Brian. The audio's clean. The
No,
video's
no,
clean.
he's reached new levels, James.
Well,
I mean,
the problem is that the guys here aren't hearing the other people speak through their earbuds, and
I
they should.
I don't really care about that. I can hear them speak. So
Yeah,
I'm good.
Yeah,
with
I know.
that.
Kim, can you hear audio? James, talk.
Hello, Kim. Can you hear me?
Hey, James, I can hear you fine. How about you? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we're good. And again, I'm not
Can you
part.
hear
I mean, look,
both
I'm just the
earbuds
button
here?
presser. Y'all just talk among yourselves out there, so we're good.
Okay. All right.
If you need
I'll
to
just-
raise it, you're number 3.
I don't know which number I am,
We're about
James.
to, we're about to hit the television side here. So
Right, so everybody be good. No more
Okay.
condom words
yeah,
or
no,
anything.
no more condom jokes.
The earbuds are apparently very sensitive. That's what I just
Paul
found out.
Feinbaum
We
on
just
Radio
blew
Row at the SEC
Kim's
football
eardrums out, I think.
thing.
Now, what you
Okay,
can do is
see.
go to these wireless ones, Brian. These sound good. These
He didn't say that was an option.
Yeah, how many of those can you hook up at one time?
That's a good question. What do they call AirPods?
AirPods. Yeah, but how many?
I've got my
how many-
AirPods, but I didn't bring them down because I didn't think we
How
could
many
use
can
them.
you hook up to one Bluetooth?
I think only one.
Yeah, that,
You know,
I mean,
if you drop down a Bluetooth list, I mean, I've got all kind of Bluetooth things showing up here. So
But I don't think you can be on one, but more than one at a time.
but I think you can only have one.
But you probably could have done that, Brian. And then
All right, and let's
We're
welcome our
good, we're good,
television
we're good.
viewers. Good evening, good
Hello,
evening, good
television
evening, good
viewers.
evening. Good evening.
Woo.
We are live, about to start WeatherBrains now that we're on television. This is the pre-show, but we're going to morph into this. So let's go right to it. We're going to go live to California, the Cement
Garden Grove.
7341.
Movie stars. All right, here we go. And let me get the recorders going here. Recorder track number 1, recorder track number 2. Brian, tell those people to quit talking in there.
Sorry.
Okay, we have silence on the set.
Yeah. Let me get started, and you guys can have. I promise it is all yours. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains, the weekly show that's all about weather. The first weather podcast in the universe. Not the only one now. Everybody's got a weather podcast. There must be 1 million of these things. But we're the old podcast guys here. Thanks for watching and listening. We're doing this on September 18th, 2017. This is episode number 609. And it's a special, ladies and gentlemen, because our crew is gathered together and we are going live to Anaheim, California, Orange County. To the associates I see here, I see Bill Murray, Rick Smith, Kim Cloco, and we got Brian Peters. So one of you guys pick it up and take it and run with it. It's a National Weather Association special.
And here's Bill.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I guess it's the 42nd annual NWA meeting, and it's really exciting. Got a great turnout here in sunny Southern California. James, we've had the marine layer every day, until around noon. It's starting to thin out a little more each day, but, it's kept things a little cooler. We've been in the middle 70s for the highs and, overnight lows in the 60s. So it's been very comfortable. So we've had a really good time here and a great presentation so far. We had 150 National Weather Service meteorologists and about 400 NWA members that are here. And it's been a great week so far. And we're not even halfway done, Rick Smith, especially if we got here Saturday.
It seems like we've been here a week already, and I didn't get here as early as you guys did, but it's been just jam-packed with stuff from the student and broadcaster conferences yesterday to a full day today, and we're just really
Bill and I got
started.
here Thursday, so we feel like we've already been here a week.
And we don't leave till Friday, so it's one of those Wheel of Fortune 9-day, 8-night vacations, Brian. But
I'm on Wheel of Fortune. Really?
well, we could probably get you.
Where's
on there.
Vanna?
Yeah, and this morning, James, my voice started to go out, so I was like you you know, because I had to yell, you know, Saturday at the Weather Fest in the big meetings with the exhibitors and the volunteers. And then we did 2 hours of student mentoring yesterday, which was just spectacular. Kim was a part of that. Rick, were you a part of that?
No.
Pat was. Pat Spoden who's with us here tonight in just a minute. We'll talk about to him in just a minute. But you know, all this yelling and talking put my voice in agony. So Nick Walker had some really good advice at the broadcaster session yesterday. He did a whole 15-minute talk, James, on, you know, how to take care of your voice. And so I did everything he said not to do this morning. I drank lots of coffee, you know, didn't hydrate, and it just got better. So I found a different way to project. I think it's something to do with the diaphragm. James, how do you do it?
You just keep pushing, Bill. You just keep pushing and pushing and pushing till it won't go anymore.
Yeah, well, that's my theory too. That's what I did to Brian, you know, because I came in and he could only see like 3 of us, and I was like, Brian, let's keep pushing this cable as far back. So James, when we lose video, it's because I pushed the table so far back to get us a bigger field of view. So
I told Bill the cord was just so long.
So Kim, you've been here. I was so happy to see you. We didn't know you were coming. You kind of snuck in on us. Was that planned?
I did.
Okay.
It wasn't exactly planned. It was just an approvals process. I am in the week before I'm official at Sims NSSL, an official employee. So it took a little while to just get through everything and get the travel planned, but everything came through at pretty much the last minute, and I'm very excited to be able to join you guys here at NWA.
So they can never fire you now, right? You're a government employee and you're good forever, right?
You know, not technically a Fed, so I'm not in the unfireable stage, but I'm hoping my employers are pretty cool with me.
They are, and you're and you're pretty cool too. So yeah, it was funny, you know, losing my voice was, you know, just something I was really scared about for tonight, but it worked out. James, the Weather Fest was huge. We had a great time on Saturday. Rick got there just in time, and Pat got there. Brian, of course, was the Swami, as I heard you talking to him about. James, he had this stick. It was more than just him in the hat. I mean, Brian, you need to show them what you did when the kids would ask you a question. It was really cool. You know, and so these kids were asking, but the only question they ask him is, when was the last great earthquake in Southern California? So he just made it up, you know.
Yeah, that's the nice part about kids. You can just make up the answer.
You know, though, I did have one 6th grader that walked up, and he said to me, he said, Mr. Swami, my question is, did we cause all the flooding in Texas, meaning humans? So sound the buzzer, I guess, James. So, you know, I thought that was an interesting question coming from a 6th grader. So we needed to engage and talk about it. I had the goofy hat on, you know, look at Jiffy Pop.
There we go. There you go.
Jiffy Pop's ready. Yeah, my ear will never be the same now. But, you know, so we talked through climate change. And then, you know, then he said, well, I think that it's because all the officials in Houston, you know, didn't have any rules about building things. I was like, this is the smartest 6th grader I've ever seen besides my own.
How did he know that?
And, you know.
He's in the know.
I know, I said. So his mom
Sign
came
him
up
up.
and, you know.
Tomorrow at 10:30.
Yeah.
I made room on the agenda for it.
And I said, it's just because it's Texas. But anyway, he accepted that answer and we went on. So it was really fun. So that was very cool. Do y'all remember when Miles Musio, who's one of the program chairs with Todd Laricos, was on WeatherBrains back earlier in the year, and he announced that he was researching, Brian, do you remember the name of it? The La Mancha Index.
Oh, yes.
And so he actually did a presentation on it today. Pat, were you in for that presentation?
I was
You were in the other
I was
session.
in the other session, yeah.
But he did a presentation on his La Mancha Index, which La Mancha, James, do you remember what it means?
No.
It means the stain. I didn't know that. Did you know that, Rick?
No, I did.
So anyway, he showed the sea surface temperature anomalies and correlated them, and he's basically found out that every time the La Mancha stain is blue, this is my understanding of it, Oregon is wet. So that's all I know.
Yeah.
So before that, more than that, we're going to have Miles back. But
Coming up is a screen share.
but I thought it was really cool that we got to do breaking news. Oh yeah, this is awesome right here, Brian, with all the weather friends. From,
There you go. How's
it's
that,
so
James?
funny because, you know, we had security, you know, out here in the, you know,
And they still let me in.
and they tried to arrest Brian. But, you know, the security guy, when he saw
that picture looks like the Village People. That's disturbing in a lot of different ways. Wow.
No,
but these
That's
kids
the
from
weather
OU
superheroes from OU.
are just incredible. And the kids loved them, and they had trading cards. and they were fun. But security did go when he saw him walk up, because we had, warned him about, things to look for and things we were worried about and stuff like that. And he goes, "Oh, it's much worse than I thought." He was a former Marine. He's ready to put him in a chokehold and take him down. But we said, no, these guys are okay. Don't mace them. They're all right.
No, they're awesome. I wish they were. Well, a couple of them are still around, but I wish we could get them on sometime. I mean, Kim, you were one of the original. Were you one of the original?
I was the inaugural ice queen. Yeah.
I have a trading card in my office that Kim's on as the ice queen.
That just is going to have to be a WeatherBrains pick of the week.
Find that.
Yeah.
Where's the card?
It's pretty awesome because it's a silhouette of me in my senior prom dress. It looked like blue and sparkling. They asked me, do you have something you can wear for this? I said, oh yes. And now it's memorialized on a trading card.
Now,
that's a life event.
Know about this, Kim?
He does. He has inherited from my mother. My mother got a whole stack of these cards, of course, but she was like, oh, and my daughter's on a trading card, so he's inherited that stack now. Oh yes, he knows.
That's funny. Well, we kicked off with a great broadcaster session yesterday. Mike Goldberg doing the fantastic job he always does, and a fantastic student session put on by Tricia Palmer. And James, Tricia Palmer was the Owlie on Saturday at Weatherfest, and she broke the record for longest time in a single day in Owlie in the costume, and she lost 12 pounds. And I don't know how she did it. So. She's gonna be Allie from now on every year. We've officially made her Allie of Weatherfest.
There you go. I think so. Good.
She's already called in sick for next year. Yeah, you can only be 5'2" to 5'8", Pat.
Yeah.
And so I guess that rules you out, huh?
Too bad.
But you're on the basketball team.
That's right.
That's good.
I always see basketball team.
And so what else at Weatherfest, Rick, was cool? We had 25 exhibitors.
Yeah, I was just impressed. One of the things at Weatherfest was the passports, where kids or anybody would grab these passports. Yeah, I see one over there. And they would go around to all the different exhibitors and get a stamp. And it was quite a job to go get, 23 stamps that you had to get. And yeah, I think it was a really good idea, and the kids were really into it. I mean, these were. I got to sit at the table for a little while and help them with the stamps and give them the raffle tickets and things like that. They had a lot of fun. They were really into it, and then I also got to see up close and personal for the first time the whatever it's called, the Ranger mobile radar.
Oh my gosh, NBC. James, you're going to have radar envy.
Yes, I have radar envy. I saw one of the NBC mobile Doppler radars. We got to have one, James. We have to have one.
James, hang on. Let me ask you, did they ever use this? I mean, I've seen markets where they have these things. I have never seen them use it for weather before.
They use it for fires, and they use it in winter storms because they have 2 other permanent Dopplers, apparently, according to Anthony. Mm-hmm. And then they have a mobile. So they've got their market covered. And they're the number 2 market, of course, James. So they say it's a marketing thing, but.
And their Jeep Storm Chaser has a mobile radar. Wait. How do we get one of those?
Brian, you have an iPad. Quit.
I know.
Jealous.
They even can show their signal, their picture on the back of the Jeep. You can flip up the back window, and there's a TV.
So we tried to offer them $4,000 for the radar, James, but they wouldn't take it.
A little low.
Yeah. James is gone now. He's left the building. But it was really cool to meet Fritz Coleman, who's like a legend. I think he's been on the air how long? 35 years or something here. And so, I mean, he's like James. He's like a legend in Los Angeles. And I got to see him on the news Friday or Thursday night when I got in, which was really cool. And they have 7 forecasts. They have 7 microclimates.
7 7-day forecasts.
7 7-day forecasts.
7 forecasts. How do they do that? They just roll through one at a time?
Yeah, it's nuts. It takes like 2 minutes of the weathercast. It's like,
no.
Did you see it, Jane?
Yeah.
Brian?
And that would take up our entire weather, our weather segment on 3340. I mean,
to explain what area you're talking about.
Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. But Fritz did a great job, and then Anthony Yanez was there, other NBC folks, and that was a lot of fun. And we had the Ali Skywarren Young Meteorologist program. They went through the flash flood module. The kids loved that. We got to do that again. That's going to be a fun thing. Gina Esco, who's been on the show several times, was engaging kids in coloring, talking about their experiences with natural disasters
Yeah,
and hazards.
did you have the chance to talk with her about some of the feedback that they got?
No, share some. Kim.
Oh,
I'm
it was
sure you
so
heard.
interesting. Yeah, I was talking with both her and Castle Williams, who organized and ran that, and they heard these children, a lot of them haven't experienced things like tornadoes firsthand, but what they were doing was having them draw what it's like to stay safe from weather hazards. Just draw what it is that you should do. A lot of kids did tsunamis, that's a local threat, but some did things like tornadoes. And they would draw people in their bunkers, but with tears coming down their eyes, and they'd say, well, why do you draw them with tears? And they put themselves into the shoes of these people, saying, well, even though they're, protecting themselves, they might save their lives, but they're still, they might lose their house, or their friends might be in trouble. And they were really empathizing, even with a situation that they hadn't themselves experienced. And they were both blown away by the kinds of things they were hearing. It was really great.
Yeah, I was standing there at the table when there was a little boy drawing a picture, and he was drawing a tornado, which is kind of unusual for out here because that's not really their thing. I mean, they happen, but and he was really good. He described that people had gotten the warning and they were in the shelter, and then as he went on, he added a car that was flying up in the air, but the people weren't in the car because they had gotten the warning and gotten out. So it's amazing.
They didn't follow the Red Cross advice. That's good.
Yeah. And Gina and Castle evidently just came up with that pretty much on the fly.
They did.
And it turned out to be very, 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 very cool. She tweeted a bunch of the pictures. So it's at WXCOM, COMM. You can go back and look at that. And in the NWAS 17 hashtag, if you go back and search for that, she tweeted a lot of them. So it was awesome.
Yeah, you'll be looking at that hashtag for a long time because there's a whole bunch of tweets in that one for sure.
I just added a couple. So.
But Castle and Gina did a great job, and on the fly too, because Gina, I was thanking her for coming to the event, and she was funny because she said, Bill, I could tell in the tone of your email that I really needed to come. I wasn't like desperate or anything, Brian.
Ooh.
We got our funding right there on the 1st of August, thanks to Henry Rothenberg in Nashville, because we literally were canceling the event, and Henry came through with 2 foundations that kicked in $10,000. So luckily Wednesday, we're going to hand a check to the NWA Foundation for $3,200 for all that effort. So that's just going to be really huge. So I'm really excited about that. So all the talks yesterday were super, all the different things that went on. This morning we heard from Dr. Louis Uccellini, the director of the National Weather Service. And one of the things that he hit on really hard was this alarming propensity that media outlets have had to present deterministic model output and to sort of compete the American versus the European and all this stuff. And so I don't know if James is with us. I think he may have really left the building. It may be us, but it's a very alarming trend. And there were some really extremely caustic articles written after the event. And I think that is a scary thing that we as the Weather Enterprise need to battle. Kim, I know you probably got thoughts on that somewhere along the way.
Battling the caustic.
No, well, just this, this propensity that,
sharing the model, the raw model.
Saying, okay, well, the Europeans going to Miami. Now the Europeans 25 miles west of Key West. And
this is a really interesting conversation in the Weather Enterprise now. I think this is actually one of our most significant challenges in communicating in social media, that we have all these people who will take small pieces of the forecast, and they're not making meaning of it in ways that necessarily make sense to people. There are a lot of messages getting out. And I think that one of the things we're just going to have to rely on is that people are going to get tired of it. It's, the economist hat putting it on. I see it as a supply-demand problem. People have to stop seeking this sensationalistic information and try to go to trusted sources to get, more of the story. Because if you're just looking at those little bits and pieces, you've got to know over time, well, that's not necessarily what happens. That's a really low probability outcome, maybe that one single forecast. It's a real challenge right now that we're facing.
And a big part of it, I think, is meteorologists like to talk about the weather, and they use Twitter. We're using Twitter for multiple purposes. We're using Twitter as a means to share warning information and alert the public and give people, the general public, information about what may be coming. But we're also using it as hobbyists or meteorologists who are talking about the science, like a closed bulletin board or something. And so Twitter is serving both of those purposes, and you can't really wall off one from the other. And that's, I don't know.
Mhm.
It is an issue, and it's going to happen. I mean, people are going to discuss it, but like you said, I just don't really know what the general public does with that. I can't
Yeah.
imagine it helps.
It makes me kind of miss the blogging era, when people had full thoughts and, whole thesis written out on a particular forecast, and now you're getting just a tweet. Well, like you said, it's worth highlighting amongst ourselves, amongst friends. These are things we like to point out and discuss what's possible, but when that's going out to everyone, they don't necessarily know what to make of it in just that small little bite.
And there's different kind of users. There's the real basic, but there's also users that are much more refined. As an example, a couple weeks ago, people were evacuating out of Miami, right? I'm in downtown Paducah. An ice cream cone. It's a good day for it. And anyway, I see this family, and they're obviously mobile, and there's 2 dogs in the back, 3 kids. And I look around, and sure enough, there's, they're from Florida. So I asked them, I said, well, are you evacuating, or are you just happen to be here? He says, no, we're evacuating. They're heading up to family in Wisconsin. And one of the first questions he asked me was, who's Mike? When he found out that I work with the National Weather Service, he goes, who's Mike? Well, we have a forecaster in our office named Mike, but I didn't think that was who they were talking about. And so I have no idea. What are you talking about? He goes, the guy with the spaghetti page, the spaghetti plots. Yeah. This is, yeah. So there's a guy who has a page of spaghetti plots, and this guy looks at it. Now, he is probably your upper echelon user. He worked for the insurance industry, so he understood a little bit, about it. But they asked me some basic things about hurricanes. But I just thought, these people are looking at spaghetti plots. So I don't know where to go from there.
Well, it's so interesting, right? Because you look at the cone, and that is really drawn, for those who aren't familiar, it's the one best guess track, and then the rest of the cone drawn around it is just historical error. It's how far off
The center could be.
the center, and that's
Not the
just
impact. but the
very
center.
importantly, just the center, not even all of the swath of impacts. And I think there's a really interesting opportunity to think about, if people are really seeking something more like these spaghetti plots, is there an opportunity for us to think about representing what we think the reasonable most westward track could be, or the reasonable most eastward track could be? And that doing something a little bit different from just the one track that has that historic error around it, because people are really seeking this information, and if we're not giving them more, then that's where they're going to go, straight to the models. Can we give them something that's a little bit better than that?
That's our challenge. That's for sure. Hey, James, we want to bring Greg Carbon over here in a second. I think they're going to try to find him because he had an interesting talk. We want to talk to Bill Bunting before we get there. We want to hear from Pat Spoden about Ron Prespolinski, who this activity tonight is in honor of, all his effort. And Ron's going to share some information about Ron. He was truly an amazing person. We had a shot at getting Gary Satkowski. He had a fantastic talk this morning. But I think Gary turned into a pumpkin at 6:30, so we lost him. But we do have a new slogan in the Weather Service. We have a turn around, don't drown, and beat the heat, check the back seat. What else, Rick? Can you think of any others?
When thunder roars,
Go indoors. That's one of the best ones. That's great. And so now we have a new one, courtesy of our friend Jeff Carbon. The blend is your friend. Talking about the national blend of models, and I've got 2 NWS guys here, and Craven has a new saying. So I was kind of surprised at some of the verification, Rick, that the blend is sometimes beating or frequently beating the NDFT. Did I read that right, or was that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in a lot of situations, and it's mostly those situations where it's not an extreme weather event, but the blend is doing very well. And a lot of times what we're finding is when the forecasters get in there and start tinkering around a little bit with, well, I think the dew point on day 7 is going to be 60 and not 58, or, winds, temperature, whatever the field is, then we end up making it worse. But forecasters are still a valuable part of the process, though, and they're making a difference in those extreme events, which the blend doesn't really do that well with.
And there's a corollary to his slogan, Pat, and that is use your knowledge and expertise to own the IDSS portion.
Exactly. Where can you add value? On a day or a week where, you know, a nice week in Oklahoma in the October, okay? It's pretty nice, pretty calm, pretty tranquil. It can do a great job. But when you're going above normal, below normal, can it keep up then? And those are the situations where the forecasters can really add value, like in the heat waves. You guys have heat waves in Oklahoma? No, okay.
Yeah, never.
Pleasantly mild.
All year round. Yeah. I heard it's the same in Texas.
Yeah.
That's just what I hear. But anyway, you know, there are times when you can add value. Where can we be a part of the forecast? So it's a kind of a man-machine mix.
Exactly, and we saw that in the facets fee information, you know, that we heard from today, because for the first time I really saw you guys live there and see this stuff all the time, but we actually looked at, you know, how a fee plume might be created today. And I've been waiting for that for like 5 or 6 years, you know, just hearing, you know, Lance and Alan and everybody talk about it. Now it's really amazing to see it coming to, you know, into fruition potentially in the near future. And it occurred to me today, I may be crazy, but I went up to the COO of the National Weather Service. You know, it looks to me like, and y'all may run me out on a rail, this may be my last show of WeatherBrains, but, you know, it looks like maybe a public-private partnership might have something that might get that to the field faster, because I think that is going to be a really valuable tool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a game changer as the question is how to get that information out. Some users are going to want a 10% probability of a tornado, a hospital, some, you know, your upper end users or something like that. But the general public, 10%, I don't want to know that, or I may not want to know that. So it might be more like 50 or 60%, or will you allow people to determine it on their own? Mm-hmm. I mean, all these things have to be thought out. I mean, I was able to go to the hazardous weather test bed this spring and work with Kim, and you know, it was fascinating working with the tool and then trying to communicate with the emergency managers in another room and with a broadcaster in another room. And we had different information than they did, but it was a challenge, but it was really good. I thought it was great stuff.
I think a lot of people, and Kim, you're involved with this, so I'll let you speak to this. But I think a lot of people, there was a question in the broadcasters workshop yesterday about, well, people still need a tornado warning. You can't tell the public there's a 12.5% chance of something. You're still going to need a binary yes or no warning.
What
all
level
of that
is
can
that?
fall out of that.
Yeah. What level is that? How do we, you know, are the social scientists going to be able to tell us that?
What triggers the deterministic warning?
Or are you going to have a weather radio, or your phone you set it on your phone? I want to know when there's a 30%, or I want to know when there's a 40%. Yeah, can you run that? Slider, like how many times you want your phone to go off?
Yeah.
Right. Well, so one of the things that we're finding and going through the results from the last couple of years working in the test bed is that there is no single probabilistic threshold everyone agrees to for what should trigger a tornado warning. I know it's surprising. It can vary by if it's going to hit a city, if it's a particularly severe, it could be a severe event, you might have a lower threshold. And so we're looking at that and thinking, gosh, maybe it should just be a background layer, just an additional piece of information, but we allow the warnings to go on much as they have been. This is actually something that we're hoping to research in the next phase. We've always assumed that the warnings would sort of fall out at some threshold, and I think we're finding that that's just not going to work.
It's going to be an interesting process to try and figure this out.
And I thought it was interesting that there are 4 or 5 levels of bad word automation in the process. Some storms can sort of, you know, the software can sort of manage them itself, but there's this level where it's totally manual and the forecaster's totally in control. And
you have to have all of that. I mean, it's unmanageable. I've never participated in the test bed. I see it through the glass, but never been in there. But it doesn't
tap on the glass. It's not
don't tap on the glass.
Don't feed the animals.
No, you can feed our forecast. You can use flash photography if you want to. But no, we from what I'm hearing, from what Chris Carson's did a great presentation today on this, it's really not practical for a forecaster to draw these plumes or draw these individual areas around every storm. So there is and that's one of the things that's being worked on, is this man-machine mix that can, in a really intelligent way, help the forecaster. But when the forecaster needs to jump in and use their expertise, it's going to be the best of all those worlds, I think. So.
But one of the coolest things I got excited about today, and there's Greg Stumpf, and he and Pat have done such a great job.
Understand me. Okay, I'll be back.
All right, you come back because we're gonna have you back over. But one of the things that really excited me, and I'm not a National Weather Service forecaster, and I hope maybe this will be available on my PC in my office one day. But the near storm environmental awareness tools that Kim Runk is working on look like real game changers to me too. Because you've got these, cursor tools and different displays that are just amazing in, interrogating the near storm environment. And I really was like, oh, I would kill to have that tool because these are things that we have to keep up with manually. And Rick, you can probably comment, and I know Greg can, about that.
I got something.
Go, Greg. And we've got Greg Carbon, who's the new branch chief. He's now in management. I think he left the building. I think he took the night off.
Yeah. Well, hi, James, wherever you are. The virtual James.
Yeah.
He's always virtual.
But it's not.
Is he really a real James?
Yeah, he's just that avatar right there. Yeah. But it's not Oklahoma anymore, Greg, for you, is it?
No, but you can do some of what you were just talking about already on the SPC mesoanalysis page. If you go to that page and click ahead of some storms, you will actually get a readout of the environment with respect to climatology for severe storms, whether they're tornadoes or wind threat or cluster. You have a really nice readout on the. I don't know if you've used. Have you used?
No, that's my pick of the week now.
It's really nice,
so and that's my pick of the week, Brian.
And it's fascinating to look at the evolution of that information with time. So, as an event is beginning, you might click on a spot, say in northern Alabama, and the environment doesn't look all that favorable. Next hour you go in and you see how the parameter space changes with time and how that risk may increase for significant tornadoes based on the mesoanalysis. So that Kim's talk today used that within AWIPS, but that actually is available on the web through the mesoanalysis page. And that's work by John Hart and Brian have done that work to incorporate that climatology into the mesoanalysis. So I was also fascinated by Karsten's talk.
Absolutely.
He has, in that, watching the evolution of what he's brought out of that is really fascinating. It's been remarkable to see how it's changed just in 1 year from his talk a year ago to where we are now. It's gotten a lot more complicated. But I'm interested in knowing whether you can scale that decision-making process up. So if you can go from severe storms to, say, winter storm,
right, or hurricanes,
or large
fire weather. Yes.
My gut says you should be able to do that. And also, I'll make a prediction that that's where Chris is going next, because now he's at SPC. So he's going to be looking at that model with respect to day 1, day 2, day 3 threats.
And you're doing some of that now with the excessive rainfall outlook.
I don't know what I'm doing.
But we're glad you're doing it, Greg.
Yeah,
so talk about some of the cool things y'all are doing at WPC.
So actually, looking at Chris's model, I was thinking about applying that to heavy rainfall and excessive rainfall. We've been looking at what the Weather Prediction Center does with respect to precipitation, but the mission there is very broad. It goes from medium range to surface analysis to precipitation. But there is expertise in precipitation forecasting and also a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge with respect to model output for precipitation, what we call QPF, right? But the playing field is changing. Right? You look at things like the National Blend of Models. You look at ensemble forecasts. It's very difficult to convey a precipitation forecast in a probabilistic way. People want to see how much rain am I going to have over the next day or 2 or 3.
And then they call me when they don't get it.
Yeah. And so right now, almost all of those forecasts are presented in a deterministic way. You look at the map and you look at, the contour of 1 inch or 2 inch. How do we go beyond that? And we do. I mean, we have probabilistic information, but it's very challenging. It's very cumbersome to present that information in a way that is an array of solutions, and confidence levels. So the one unique product I think the Weather Prediction Center has is the excessive rainfall outlook, which is similar to the convective outlook. But it's a little different because what constitutes excessive rainfall, it's supposed to be tied to flash flooding, the potential for a flash flood. Well, what is a flash flood? We kind of know what a tornado is. We kind of know what a hail event or a wind damage report is. And I thought, oh, well, it should be pretty easy. Flash flooding is not, and it's different depending on the basin, depending on the antecedent conditions. It really is a different animal.
Depending on the forecaster who's defining
Yeah,
it.
right,
There's
right.
A lot,
Yeah. So yeah, your flash flood is not mine. And then when does it go from being a flash to being
An aerial
a flood, right, or a river flood?
Or a
And
river flood.
there's not a lot of agreement on that. And there are a lot of different players in that game, hydrologists and others, water resource managers and others who are involved in trying to better understand what rainfall does and how it does it, and how do we do that. And so it's a really challenging forecast situation with what WPC does. Makes me wish I could go back to severe sometimes, but no, I'm delighted where I am. I like DC. I like being back east. But, I think it was a show a couple of months ago we did where James asked about why don't people understand or take flooding as seriously as they do severe or tornadoes. And afterward, I can't remember, I didn't come up with this, but somebody said, well, water just doesn't seem all that dangerous. You take a shower every day, you walk out in the rain. That doesn't seem like a threat.
You go swimming in the pool.
Yeah, water doesn't come across as a real danger unless it falls as 50 inches in 3 days, right? So we have a real challenge with respect to communicating the risk associated with excessive rainfall. It's more challenging in some respects than a tornado or a severe storm. So there's a lot to do.
So Greg, talk about that amazing experience with Harvey in Houston. Take us through that week, because it was an amazing week.
It was. Well, it was really a weekend, I think.
But the week. The week leading up in your
Right,
forecasting.
Right. Well, the initial focus was all on Harvey, and it was interesting watching Dr. Uccellini's talk this morning, because I almost had a little bit of PTSD.
Mhm.
I don't want to. Yeah, it's a little bit strong a term, but we've dealt with this before. This experience, like, oh no, I'm reliving this challenge of trying to understand and convey some certainty in the presence of a lot of uncertainty, but also a signal that something bad is going to happen. So watching some of the satellite images, I'd actually even forgotten how well defined Harvey was at landfall, and all the attention on, was it Rockport?
Right.
Yeah, the island there, and Corpus and Victoria. And the initial forecasts were going to go inland and stop. So the initial forecasts were all like extremely heavy rain in addition to
And we've
wind.
seen that in the Texas Hill Country many times.
Right. And so we're all focused a little further south initially than the Houston area. But with time, it becomes increasingly evident in the numerical models and in the forecasts and ensembles that potential was actually going to redevelop to the north and actually encompass Houston. The worst place, that you'd want that to happen. And then, of course, I go back to Allison, because that's your benchmark, right? So Tropical Storm Allison, 2001. Yeah. June of 2001, stalled right over Houston, 3 feet of rain, incredible amount of rain, incredible problems. So that's the benchmark. And you're like, okay, they've done this before, they're going to see it again. But then all of a sudden you're like, no, there's more. There'll be another round. And it's more widespread. The aerial coverage of the incredible rainfall is a much larger area than and Bill Reed, former Hurricane Center Director, former MIC in Houston, was posting his updates on Facebook. And I actually reached out to him and messaged him. I said, what's the latest? Because he was, up all night. This is the first all-nighter he'd worked since he was in the Weather Service and retired, and watching the water rise to points he'd never seen before. That really hit home. It's like somebody you know is right there, and they're worried that their house is going to flood, and they're a meteorologist, and they should know where to put their house. So, if he's worried about flooding in his house, this is serious. And so this gradual realization that by Saturday, I think Dave Novak, my boss, looks at me and says, we're actually, this is something we've not experienced before, and we need to figure out what the message is. We've already got catastrophic flooding, but how do we ramp it up, because it's not something that anyone has experienced here. So we started talking about wording with Patrick Burke, who's also a very exceptional forecaster at WPC, and we worked on the wording, and we provide that wording, that key message, to the National Hurricane Center and others. And it's on, you're kind of thinking, are we overdoing it?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Getting an ovation for that.
Enough. That's enough. And actually, it was really close coordination with the Houston office too. Jeff Evans down there, Lance Wood, and the staff at Houston. We're in touch with them, and we're like, does this sound right to you? And we all agreed that we were going into uncharted territory and probably going to experience something that has not been experienced before. And sure enough, it evolves, and then it's not over. It's not just Houston. Then all of a sudden, there's this realization that, oh my God, this area of incredibly heavy rain is going to move up to the northeast and encompass Beaumont, Port Arthur overnight. It's always uncertain about Lake Charles, and there was a lot of concern about New Orleans because the pump situation that had happened a few weeks earlier with New Orleans. And it became increasingly evident that New Orleans was not at risk, and that even Lake Charles was on the edge. So it all evolved, thinking back, it was just a blur, really. I mean, it was just, you're constantly evaluating something that you've not experienced before and trying to understand that in terms of the magnitude of the risk and messaging that. So, and that was just Harvey. I mean, Irma came a week later.
With 3 hotels
I need a drink.
in Houston. Yeah. The drinking game has begun.
Here,
With 3 hotels in Houston, the forecasts were invaluable in helping us plan as early as Friday night.
Yeah.
Gave us all day Saturday to get ready.
Yeah.
They didn't believe us.
No,
they literally
a lot of
didn't
people.
believe us.
I mean, even the forecasters, I think, and were in some disbelief. I know I was. I mean, several days out, we had 35 inches. It's like, okay, that's
Crazy, but
something happened before. And then the next day, it's like 40. And it's like, all right, really? And then, Sunday morning, I think it was 50, and it was like, so how's that going to happen, right? You had 24, 26 inches already measured, and it wasn't raining at that point, right? And the tropical storm was kind of
wandering
around coastal Texas, and the forecast was it would come back out and slowly come up the coast. And remarkably, I mean, the short-range numerical models did, I think the high-res rapid refresh showed, and maybe even the NAM showed this redevelopment of bands as the tropical cyclone moved back over the Gulf. And they did develop, and they did bring another 2 feet of rain to those areas. So,
well, Louis was remembering a time when they wouldn't forecast more than 2 inches of rain.
Yeah.
On a QPF.
How times changed.
Has flown.
And actually, WPC, similar to SPC, where I was at SPC for 20 years, and I do think that the philosophy is generally right, that the best approach is a conservative approach. You don't want to put all your eggs in an extreme forecast ahead of time, because it's likely to bust. We all know that confidence level of something really unusual happening many days in advance. And even, we issued at WPC the first day 3 high risk. We don't do that. We don't issue, just like SPC, you can't issue a high risk at 3 days out because you don't have the confidence that something like that can happen. But the forecaster is saying, I think I have enough confidence. And So we're on the phone, can we do this? Can we actually issue a high risk? Is it important? It was important to FEMA. They said, if you can do this, help us with the messaging. So we did. But if you look at it, it's a little bit displaced. I mean, Houston's right on the edge. So it's not necessarily but that doesn't matter. What matters is the messaging, that there's something really bad about to happen in about 2 or 3 days. We have confidence in the magnitude of the event. We may not have confidence in the air. It's going to be close enough that we should get that message out.
I think a lot of people don't realize the deliberation that goes on.
Oh,
you talked about these coordination calls and one word. I mean, people don't understand how big of a deal that is to say exactly how you're going to word that, because I think the wording that was used in the Hurricane Center graphics, and the Weather Service put out a graphic that went viral, and I think people caught that when you say we've never seen anything like this before, that really got it. Now you can't do that every time.
No,
and that was a lot of.
And you
called me out the other day for having gray hair. You got to cut.
There's a lot more than the last time I saw him.
And that's the only reason I did it, because I'm like cat calling the kettle black. No, I'm calling myself Greg.
You're mixing your metaphors there, Greg.
But it's
Let's be consistent, Greg.
It's been, and I mentioned too that people pick up on those social cues. When James did it on April 27th, people knew something was different about this than your run-of-the-mill tornado event in Alabama. He was nervous. He was taking his coat off. They pick up, those are things that are incredibly important that you really can't plan for. You just see people are doing things they've not done before, or they're out of their element because they're out of their element.
And then in Irma, we saw personal pleas, from the National Weather Service Key West. And I saw John Morales in Miami at NBC do that on Saturday evening. And those are powerful. And
John's doing it again now. I mean, with
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with yet another catastrophic event for Puerto Rico. I'm not sure, how that's going to affect the translation of a lot of Hurricane Center products go through San Juan. And so we're going to find out in a few hours exactly, how is that going to work? I know there's backup capability there. So, but let's hope that it's not as bad as it looks right now for those areas.
You've been through Harvey, you've been through Irma. Talk a little bit about the staff at the Hurricane Center, the staff at WPC. I mean, your people, and I mean, you just went through 2 extraordinary events, and here you are getting ready to go again potentially. What's that like? I mean,
the staff is remarkable. The national centers like SPC, I mean, you bring in people who are incredibly dedicated, and the FOs too. I mean, we're all in there because we love what we do, and to some extent, you run on adrenaline. When these things happen, you're looking at this in disbelief, but you've got a mission. You've got to perform at a level that is above and beyond. And I think that was really remarkable with respect to backing up the Hurricane Center at WPC. There was tremendous stress, but people came in. I didn't see anybody snap. I didn't see anybody get upset. I mean, everybody knew that there were going to be shortcomings. We had to work through this. It hadn't been done before. And what was remarkable also is that we had support from the Hurricane Center. We had support from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. Bob Ballard and Tim Burchard came out. They were willing to work 12-hour shifts. They didn't even ask questions about what shift, I decided, okay, you're going to work the 12 hours a day and you're going to work at night. Nobody bothered to say, well, I'd rather work this or that. There was no, and I didn't even know these folks before they showed up. And that was truly amazing to see that teamwork come together. And to some extent that relieved, even though there's still stress in operations at WPC, they were looking over there and going, well, we got NHC covered. There was just this really interesting dynamic that evolved. I brought in water and food, and the place evolved, and people are like, what happened here? So kind of exciting, you know, that you're doing something that's never been done before.
So Rick, talk for a second about, I know you had Jonathan Kurtz, who was in Key West, but there was this actual load sharing where, and how does that differ from the normal office backup where San Antonio was backing up, Austin, San Antonio was backing up Key West? I mean, where they literally became that office within 2 days, just in case they had to take over.
There was a lot of improvisation, may not be the perfect word, but there was a lot of
It's a good word.
Improvisation.
I
let's
like
call
that.
it that. But by a bunch of very intelligent people who thought, you know, every backup office for every Florida office is essentially within the body of Florida, and the entire state is going to be affected by this. So there were some really quick decisions made, and I've seen Trevor Boucher running around here and Jared Allen from the San Antonio office. That office just did amazing things to go from no plan to do that to you are the Key West office now when they lost their ability to send products out. So yeah, I mean, Greg mentioned it, the Weather Service, it's just a bunch of very committed people who get it done however you can, and sometimes it's not pretty, but you know, it got the job done. I think moving forward, I think we'll be looking at things like this more closely. I hope that as we're assessing this and looking back on what we can do better next time or what we learned from this, that it'll, you know, I think I think we knew before, but I think this is really firmed it up that, you know, I don't think you can have too many levels of backup, but
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Well, we got a show title out of what you just said. The Weather Service is a bunch of committed people.
What are we committed to?
Yeah. So you're not going to use my original one, right, Brian?
What was the original one?
Okay. Well, if you don't remember, that's good. I've used my Men in Black stick.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So now someone posed an interesting question to me, Greg.
I think it's complicated. That's a great title for a show right there. It's complicated.
I like that.
I do too.
It could go for many different things.
Pat, you're bordering on being a permanent panelist. You better stop it. Okay.
Next year's NWA annual meeting theme.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
You know,
I like that.
I'll talk to Alan.
There you go.
Our president.
So Greg, someone asked me an interesting question today. Is the SPC backup still off it? And I didn't know the answer. So how does that work now?
SPC is always traditionally been backed up by the Air Force. It used to be off it up in Omaha, but as maybe 10 years ago was changed to the Operational Weather Squadron at Scott Air Force Base.
Outside St. Louis? Okay.
Yeah, just outside of St. Louis. And I did go up. I've been to both places to experience that capability. And actually, we did have to implement Scott at one point, briefly. I don't remember the year. But so the Air Force forecasters that do thunderstorm forecasting will come in and essentially use the same software that is used at SPC to issue outlooks and watches, but it will not be the same as what you would get from SPC. There isn't a absolute redundancy across the board there. How can there be? I mean, you're dealing with completely another agency. You're dealing with the DoD. Not the DOC. So it's an interesting backup. WPC is actually backed up by SPC, but only for precipitation forecasts, no excessive rainfall outlooks. I mean, there's a lot of capability that WPC has that doesn't have backup for it. And so I'm sure if you peel back a number, we back up what we can. Significant backup plans are difficult to implement and practice. So, yeah, SPC has a backup, but it's a crude one.
That's good to know. Kim has an important question, and then we've got to get Greg and Pat in here to talk about the RON tonight. But Kim, ask your question, please.
Well, I'll bring us home on the conversation about backups. This is especially for the local WFOs, but I'm really interested as the social scientist in the room and as a geographer. What information is translated between the people who are giving and then doing the backups about the local populations you're serving, those relationships that are so important to giving IDSS, even especially in this case where the backups were created on the fly, for example, in Florida. What was done and what could you do in that time frame to convey all that local knowledge about the people you're serving and how that works?
I'm looking at Trevor over there to give me the answer. Not much on that time scale. And honestly, probably not much even on the established first, second, third level backups. I mean, we do testings and we are familiar. And in general, the backup offices are close to the offices that they're backing up. So our offices for Norman are Tulsa and Fort Worth and then Austin, San Antonio. But yeah, there's not. I mean, there's no way that you can truly reproduce the services that office provides when you really think about everything from the personal relationships and the knowledge. And, you know, it's in some cases it's just going to be, we're going to get something out and we're going to do the best we can. And it's like Greg said, it's not going to be exactly like it. But in a perfect world, we should look at things like that. There should be exchange.
We actually do in Central Region where I'm at. We actually do have shared drives where we have all of their contacts and their emergency managers.
Yes.
We have
that too.
Yeah, all that. Yeah. You know, really we can back up everything except for their social media stuff. So that's something that we really need to work on. But everything else, we can be them. I mean, when we had the ice storm in 2009. Springfield and Louisville were us for almost a week. So, and you talk to our customers, they didn't know. Now, granted, most of them didn't have electricity, so they probably weren't really watching anyway. But, you know, the regular person is not. Yeah, you know, nobody knew that we were down for that long.
Kim, I remember in Birmingham, we had a large book that had like county by county with contact information, names of sheriffs, phone numbers, all that sort of stuff. That was duplicated for our backup office.
Yeah,
and
we have on Google.
So there is not in this case, because this was on the fly, as everybody's pointed out, but we have on our established backups, we have exchanged that kind of information, but you still don't, you know, the personal contact is still not there. But part of the job that I had as WCM was to let our people know that in a backup, they could be contacted by another office.
Oh,
you know,
great. So they had a heads up
at least in my office, they had a heads up. Now, you know, nobody liked it, but a lot of times the practicing that Rick mentions is simply getting all the headers correct and all of that, which that's complicated in and of itself. But as Pat just said, sometimes a backup can occur and it is pretty much transparent, except if you look very closely in the header and understand the header of a product, you can tell because it'll say something like National Weather Service Birmingham issued by Atlanta.
And that's what the Hurricane Center product said out of Weather Prediction Center. But one thing I want to say about the backup for Irma, you know, these Spanish translations were, I believe, being routed through San Juan to reissue, and they would do that for landfalling tropical systems. They wouldn't do it necessarily for tropical storms that are not affecting territories of the mainland. If San Juan goes down, what is the backup, right? And so during the continuing continuity of operations discussions, we were trying to figure out. So if San Juan goes down, how do we handle translation of hurricane products? Luckily, you know, San Juan was, you know, clipped by Irma, but they stayed up. So that didn't become a scenario. Now, I know Southern Region has a translation function, and that would have possibly been utilized, but we also have an international desk at WPC. So we have a number of people who are bilingual in Spanish, and actually we were providing information to other islands for the USAID program and we do that regularly for these. So even for Maria right now, WPC International Desk provides rainfall for those islands. And so there's an interesting dynamic there as far as local populations or translation services.
Yeah, there is a team within the Weather Service for Spanish language translation that will do that. But I can tell you though, the next time I talk to the emergency managers as a group, the backup thing is going to be a topic, because they do need to be reminded of that. I mean, they do need to know that, hey, don't be surprised sometime if somebody from Tulsa is answering your question in chat, or somebody from Fort Worth is producing your severe thunderstorm warning or something. So
yeah, we actually do backups quite often. I would say probably 3-4 times a year.
Yeah, we do.
We're backing up the other office so that we are in practice, that we know all the products that we're supposed to issue. And also in those times, it's a great time to find out what doesn't work. What do we need to work on?
Right.
We've even had forecasters from Louisville come to our office, and we sent our forecasters to Louisville, and they backed each other up at the same time. And then you'd notice, well, you know, I don't have my procedures and the programs to get what I used to look at. And those are things that you discover, because there's sometimes you're going to have the catastrophic and you're going to have to go full scale backup. What's missing? And they're great training tools.
Well, Greg, this is a fascinating conversation. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's
thank you.
amazing how
Glad to be
fast
here.
50 minutes will go by
Yep.
when you have great guests and great panelists. And but thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you for everything you do. We're glad to talk to you.
Thanks, WeatherBrains.
So cut off the billion-dollar
Already
disasters, please.
That's
Okay.
great.
No more billion-dollar disasters.
I
Greg.
want to do that, but I can't. I can't
Greg,
do that.
Greg is going to have to go with the top 15.
Oh Lord, let's
Yeah,
hope
that's
not.
tomorrow. I better get working on that.
Yeah, you got homework to do. So stay out of the karaoke tonight. So we got to ask. We've got to get Greg Stumpf over here really fast, because he's got duties coming up. We're of course tonight at the Research and Operations Nexus at the National Weather Association annual meeting, and we had Greg on a few weeks ago to talk about it. But first, we want to talk to Pat Spoden, who's at the National Weather Service in Paducah, and Pat, tonight. The RON, we love making acronyms, and I don't know how it came about. Maybe y'all can share, but it sure worked out.
It took a while to come up with how are we going to do this to make it RON. And you Greg was implemental.
Harold Brooks, I think, gets the he gets credit for that.
Oh,
we
well,
had the
Harold's
R and
credit.
the O, and it said we need an N in there somehow. So,
So Nexus is the word.
Yeah, Nexus, I always knew as a Dan Fogelberg song from the Innocent Age, but Ron was an amazing man, Pat. And,
that's an understatement.
Exactly, I'm good at understatements. But you shared some information with us, and I know you want to talk through some points about this man. But he really was a unique individual, and his work and his regular life and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So
how many of you have your own wiki page? Did you make your own?
I tried, but they took it down.
That doesn't count when you make your own. I don't think Ron made his own, but he's got his own wiki page. Okay. He's published over 50 papers, 10 formal publications, which, you're going through a lot to do formal publications. Informal publications, you get 15 as lead author, 21 as co-author, and I have 11 plus NWA abstracts, because I really don't know how many there are. But it's just one thing I tried to find, and no one can find this, is, to me, the best part of a paper is how many times you're referenced by somebody else. Now, I don't know what that number is. How many times has a Ron Przybylski paper been referenced by somebody else in another paper? That's how you know you did something.
yeah, that's more important than number of publications.
It exists, but you can't find that number.
It has to be a big number.
It'd be in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, for his reach of bow echoes and just all the 3 ingredients method and stuff that he worked with Jason Schumann on. You're just going, it's just amazing that how big his reach was. But, Ron, he's a unique person. And that's what I was trying to get. I had help from Fred Glass, is one of the forecasters in St. Louis, Mark Britt, and Jim Civiking, and a forecaster in my office, Christine Welgus, who we've all worked with Ron. And I got them to provide a few stories. So instead of getting all technical and all this other stuff about Ron, what was unique about Ron? And so they provided a few stories. He loved Brett Favre, but not necessarily the Packers. He was a huge Brett Favre fan. He was a season ticket holder for the formerly known as St. Louis Rams, that are now back in LA where they started, right? Because they started as the Los Angeles Rams.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. St. Louis Cardinals, of course. He was a ham radio operator. This part I did not know, that he loved the Rolling Stones, Johnny Cash, and ELO.
That's an interesting mix.
That's a really good mix.
I loved all three of them.
Yeah. You know, many of us do. He disliked wild animals.
Was scared of them or just disliked them?
I don't know, but they said in the office that he didn't like to survey in the Ozarks.
Even squirrels.
On the list, I have raccoons, snakes, and especially black bears.
There's also wild humans in the Ozarks.
I wasn't going to go into that, you know.
Different things to be afraid of.
Yeah. We're
Cue the deliverance music here.
This is the first thing that comes into my head is the little banjo playing. But you know, to me, those things were Ron. And anybody who knew Ron was on Ron time. Ron did not show up necessarily when you wanted him to. And so you would tell him you need to be here a half hour earlier than when you really wanted him. It was Ron, you know, and unfortunately, it may be appropriate. So I was actually late for his funeral. I went up there, but I was late for it. So I don't know if that was a tribute. I don't. Because
If that's you a break, I bet.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Did you bring a box of cereal?
No, I did not bring a box of cereal. But we always talk. You know, if you knew Ron and you looked in the back part of his car, in the back seat, there were stacks of papers, and I assume that his house was the same way, and that there were just stacks of research papers all over. That you know, he's not going to throw this stuff away. He loved gardening. He used to garden a lot. Cookouts. He'd do cookouts. He loved to do corn on the cob. They said if there's corn on the cob, Ron took care of it. There's a special way that it must be done. And so you do that way. You know, that's Ron. But they said every day when he came into work, when he got there, it'd take several trips to bring the stuff in and then several trips to take the stuff back out again. And so he's just moving stuff from one place to another because you never know what you're going to need on a day's work. And Ron, of course, Ron probably rarely worked an 8-hour day. He'd come in and be there at all times. How many students has this guy touched from St. Louis University and other places? I mean, you know, we all have student volunteers that come into our office and stuff, but, you know, Ron is going to help grad students. Ron is going to help everybody who asks. And he'd give all of his time. It didn't matter. And, you know, working on research papers, I don't know how many times he called the AMS and were able to get an extension on a paper that's due at midnight tomorrow. I haven't quite started. Can you give me that? Or, you know, or you do a preprint and everyone else has regulated to 3 pages. Not Ron. Oh, I'll call. It's okay. We'll go 5. Go 5. Don't worry about it. There's no question. They just said, okay, it's Ron. You know, they're used to it. So those are some of the things in storm damage surveys you go on. I've been on with him. It's just amazing what he knew, how he could figure it out, how he could find things, and the way that he communicated with people. One of the favorite things he'd love to do was talk to farmers. He would talk to farmers because he said, every farmer knows what other farmers' problems are. If there's damage on a farm that's 10 miles away, that farmer probably knows about it. And he's right. And each farmer that he saw, he'd write their 800 number on the back of his card and give it to them. But that's how you network in the rural areas. And he was fabulous at it. And I always kidded him that he could find damage anywhere. I was on a storm survey once, and we were going to go up and take a picture on a bluff. We turn around a corner of the bluff, there's damage. I go, and he just laughed. He just thought that was just absolutely hilarious that he could do that. But he shaped so many people. Fred Glass would talk about that, about how he shaped the ability for Fred to do radar interrogation. And I'm the same way. We've all learned from Ron, whether you know it or not, all the stuff that's out there, most of it, not most of it, but a lot of it is attributed to Ron's work. And we're all in debt to him for that, because he's a wonderful human being. But the amount of research that he did to move meteorology forward and severe storms forward compared to where we were in the 80s, you know, when he started, it's phenomenal. I just to think about it all, you just kind of, wow, that's impressive.
So Greg, what do you think some of the most important contributions that Ron had to severe storms research were?
Well, as I said to this crowd, Ron used to visit Norman a lot. In the 28 years I've been there, I met him about 1992, somewhere around then. And he was coming down a couple times a year. And he was working with a lot of people at the lab. I would say of all the folks in the National Weather Service at that time, he seemed to be making the biggest effort to make connections to severe weather research. And I thought that was phenomenal. So he had a hand in developing training back at the time for things like what we now know as quasi-linear convective system, tornadoes and bow echoes and other things like that. He kind of invented what was known as the time height diagram for studying mesocyclones that we actually ended up programming into AWIPS at one point. So he's had his hand on so many things. It's just amazing that what he's done for making those connections and bridging the gap between research and
some of them haven't even been implemented yet.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking volume coverage patterns of the radar are going to be tested based on his input, are going to be tested in the next couple of years. So
Ron's legacy will live on.
It will.
And a big part of it living on is in this event. Greg, talk about this event that's going on around us right now. We're so honored to be here.
So I'm going to make this quick because I'm going to have to run
you got to go
moderate
work.
This.
Yeah.
What we're doing, this is the third year in a row that we're doing this at the National Weather Association annual meeting. And we are bringing researchers and operational folks together to in kind of a speed mentoring, speed dating kind of style, where we have 8 different tables with 8 different topics and 3 rounds. So the topics change for each round, and we have folks that are interested in those topics sit at the table. And what we're hoping for is that researchers who have not met these operational folks meet for the first time and establish new connections and relationships for bringing great ideas either from the field or research eventually into National Weather Service operations too.
Because it's really important to target what you're doing with projects that are getting momentum and making things happen.
Yes, it is
So,
very much.
thank you so much for letting us be a part of this tonight.
You bet.
Very
So,
good.
and we're going to have 2 folks, Bruce Jones, who's sitting behind us, handed me a note, and we're going to be talking to in this next round. Who's this?
Jeff's not available.
Did we get? Is Andy going to be talking? Okay. Andy Edmond from Western Region Headquarters is going to be talking with us during round 2. So I've got to go. So
Does Pat get
I
to
don't know if we're going to find a sub for me or do I?
We'll find something. We've got to get out there in the next 2
Good.
minutes.
Y'all go do what you need to do.
Thank you, Greg.
Pat, thank you for the outstanding characterization. You know, you're getting really close to being a permanent panelist there,
Well,
Mr. Commissioner of Committees.
Yeah.
New job in the NWA, a really huge
That
job.
sucker-
Congratulations on that.
Sucker word is
Well,
yeah. Congratulations. I'm not. Everyone says congratulations, and then I'm kind of going, well, congratulations.
Condolences.
Only
Oh, okay.
only a
Okay.
few very special people have been able to handle that job, and I think it's quite an honor that you were tapped to do it.
I was. It actually is
Enough
an honor.
said.
It is an honor to be asked. So
So good. So we
Hopefully
got
we'll have
Andy.
time.
Is Andy going to join us in a second? I guess.
so Greg's going to sub for me so I can stay if you want.
Oh, good,
So
good,
I
good,
can
good. So
Make some jokes or something.
So you actually saw hurricane folks in Paducah that
Yeah.
had evacuated from what part of the?
From
of-
I think it was
of the
just
southeast?
north of Miami because they showed me pictures of the hurricane shutters on their house, but they knew enough to get out because he worked for the insurance agency, and he had been over in Mexico where some of the hurricanes had made landfall, and he was telling me about different things that he saw, and he goes, "I don't want any part of that, and I don't want my family in any part of it." So, but he already had a flight booked like 2 days later to go back home to see how things are. So
Did you
he
hear
had
back
all
from
time.
him what the results after the storm were?
No, I did not. I didn't get his name, and it was just kind of in passing, but it was a very interesting conversation. They started asking me questions about how hurricanes work. I'm going, so
Outstanding.
they're big storms. We just get remnants where I live.
Yeah, I don't think we need earbuds because there's nobody to talk to back at HQ. I think
HQ is gone. Okay.
He's gonna come back at 8:30 and just. Yeah, really. Why are we wearing these silly things? So,
okay.
Jeff
Good.
Loxton is with us now. Jeff, it's nice to have you with us. Talk about what you saw at the first table, the first round tonight.
Yeah, we had a very interesting discussion on our ability to communicate risk and uncertainty and how to best convey the impacts that are associated with hazardous weather. And I think one of the most interesting outcomes of that was the ability to identify our audience and the ability to communicate on their level and not on a meteorologist level.
Which is not easy. Yeah. So did you guys solve that?
We did our best.
So did you see some research opportunities coming out of the other people that you were partnered with at the table?
Yeah, we kind of wrapped up our discussion with trying to identify, well, how can we tie in research to assist in this area? And one of the things we were looking at is getting graphic designers involved and the ability to graphically communicate uncertainty and risk. And also some of the things we've been talking about all along with social scientists and getting them more involved in that.
I'm really interested in the point you were talking about the audiences part. Did you guys talk about what that means when you're thinking of different audiences from an operational perspective?
Yeah, one of the interesting points that was brought up is, you're going to be communicating different types of information to a different audience. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a challenge as a forecaster when you're trying to get the meteorology of it right and to think about the wide varying audiences that you're dealing with and how do we best get the same level of information to the different level of users that are out there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really strong challenges we have in translating a lot of the social science into operations is that there are so many people and there's really only so much you can really do when you're doing this like sort of one-to-many communication. But when we're talking about communicating uncertainty, we have to be cognizant of the fact that there are people who may not understand complex numbers, complex math, as well as others. And we have to design, what you're talking about with graphic design is very important for helping that be understandable and everything else. So this conversation about audience is a really important conversation to be having. I'm glad to hear that you guys broached that subject.
Yeah, and I think there's a good bridge between what we're doing at the Weather Service offices and communicating that with our media partners. And then our media partners are able to go to a different level of communication. And so I think as we develop these deeper relationships with our core partners, that'll help bridge that gap. Go ahead.
Were there any best practices that you talked about at the table that we can take back as operational meteorologists, Jeff, that could help us immediately? I know we're talking about long-term here, work and research, but were any best practices shared that we could walk away with?
Yeah, one of the best practices was that we had someone from the CWSU, and they actually, are embedded there with the air traffic controllers and actually doing seasonal refresher training. And with the training they present to the air traffic controllers, are required to check that off, twice a year. So that was an interesting outcome. And one of the things that we're doing, sort of spreading into Central Region as well, is the probabilistic snowfall experiment, trying to communicate and display probabilistic information. So I think those were two things that came out of that.
Well, we see more and more probabilistic information. It seems that's where we're going. We often believe that folks can't understand probabilities, but I was sharing with Dave Nussbaum from WWL at New Orleans today. We had been watching the Memphis UCLA game on Saturday, and they have a little thing on the ESPN app that says Memphis has a 50.4% chance of winning. They get a first down. They have a 53% chance. UCLA gets an interception, then they have a 70% chance. I think people probably understand it better than we think. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it also goes back to the whole identifying your user. And I think different users want different types of information. There's a lot of our higher end users and core partners that want that probabilistic information. They want us to express our uncertainty. And then there are other users that at the end of the day just want to know how much you think we're going to get, kind of thing. So I think it varies.
So you probably watched with interest all they talk about facets today and have followed that through the process. And it's really interesting to see that begin to evolve, how the fee is going to be integrated into that process. So,
right.
That's going to be amazing as we see that happen. How do you feel about facets and what's coming there with that continuum of threats?
Yeah, I think Alan gave a good discussion on the combination of the human-computer, automation interface, that there is, definitely expertise out there on the human side, but there's a level of complexity that we need in a certain automation in order for us to keep up with the huge volume of data that goes into that.
Can I ask a quick question follow up on that? Yeah, I didn't know if you were pivoting, but I think this is a really important and interesting conversation. I'm interested in your perspective with the probabilistic forecasts that are already delivered by the Weather Service. Do you feel for the probability of precipitation product that there's a really good consensus about what that even means to forecasters, forecaster to forecaster consistency? And how does that, thinking about that, color what might happen if we're talking about suddenly launching 6 new probabilistic products for hazards of other kinds?
Oh yeah, I think the whole probability of precipitation opens up a whole new can of worms with the talk that we had on the National Blend of Models, with now getting down to 1 hour pops, 6 hour pops, 12-hour pop, 24-hour pop, and what is it exactly does that mean? And I think you hit it right on the head there, that it will vary from forecaster to forecaster what they think that means.
So that is interesting because, the NDFD only has 12-hour pops now, right? Speaking to our National Weather Service forecasters.
Well, actually, we do hourly out to, 18 hours, I think now? Yeah, hourly out to 18 hours, and then we do 3-hour blocks for like 12 hours, and it gets longer periods as we go out in the forecast. But
I think the NDFD database is still
it's still 12, but you can
yeah.
get that data. There's ways to find it within the cobwebs of our web.
Good. Let's talk after this.
Okay.
But Jeff referred to some complexities involved in that today in his talk. So can y'all address that as National Weather Service folks, what he maybe meant by that? The complexity of going to 1 hour pops inside the National Blend of Models.
Well, it's how are you going to put that information out there, and how again are the forecasters going to react? I remember when they talked about doing 3 hour, 6 hour. Well, you can't do 6 hour pops. That's outside the definition. Well, heaven forbid.
Make a new definition.
Yeah, you make a new definition.
You write the definition, so change the definition.
I'm just a low level person. I don't think I could do that. But they talked about how this is such a problem, and personally, I didn't have an issue with it. I think it's great because we can do things now in the forecast. Let's talk about when things are going to begin and end in the short term, to give our users more information at a specific point. Here's our best shot of when we think the storms are going to get there, and this is how long we think they're going to last. And in that time period, now we still have 6 hours blocks of how much rain's going to fall. So we haven't broken that rule or law. I'm not sure which one it is yet. So those things are there, and the more information that we can provide on a shorter time scale is going to do nothing but help people. I mean, because all the decision makers, when we have conference calls with the emergency managers, they want to know when. Yeah. Everything is when.
And really that NDFD, that forecast database, needs to be as precise as it can be in time and space and everything else, because if we're doing it right, that should be the tool that we're using to brief decision makers. Yep. If somebody calls and says, hey, we had a train derail, I need to know what's going to happen in the next 3 hours. You should be able to go right in there and pull that out, and the more detail that we have in there, the better. But I don't know that we're quite there yet, but that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the complexity that you alluded to has to do with once they have access to the different levels of information to understand that, we have a 12-hour pop that says I have a 90% chance of getting rain in that 12 hours, but I have this 1-hour pop inside there that says in that particular hour, there's only 10% chance.
Yeah.
And that definitely involves another layer of communication to our end users.
Yeah, that's something that we're thinking about in the lab with the Facets program. We might have a trade-off here. If everyone wants hyper-local information, local in space, very precise in time, those probabilities might be very small. And it might be that people see them and go, well, but realistically, that's the output. So we're going to have to come to this point where we think about, well, okay, we can make up whatever probability class we want, whatever reference class we want, but what's reasonable to create? When we start talking about communicating uncertainty, it's almost like opening Pandora's box. We can do everything. We have all the toys. Which one is the one everyone's going to want to play with?
And what information are you going to provide that will elicit the response
Mm-hmm.
that you're looking for?
Exactly. What's going to really hit the, what people need when they need it. That point is going to be the special point we need to try to get to.
It takes me back to the old Hurricane Center probability tables that came along with the advisories before the cone of uncertainty, I suppose. Those probabilities were always so low, up until right before the storm was hitting you.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they were misleading in some way, and I guess that's probably what led to the development of the cone. So,
well, you look at SPC. I mean, SPC, a 3% area, a 5% area. We still deal with that.
It's sort of ingrained in our minds,
but
that doesn't mean much to a layperson.
Yeah.
Or even a forecaster. So I have a really interesting story from a summer research project I had a student do this summer. He was looking at a new product. The SPC's put out the SCRAM model, which is this conditional probability of severe weather over the next 2 hours, given they have a storm producing lightning. And we said, okay, if you have an environment where you have CAPE and shear of different values, forecasters tell us how likely is it that that storm will go on to produce a tornado or severe hazards. And they gave us values, like 80, 90%. So when we got that information from them and then we showed them, well, here's actually what the product looks like, and it maxes out at like 20%. They looked at that and they said, well, we're much less likely to use this now that we know what these values are looking like. And this was forecasters. This is even experts. I think we're going to hit up on a real challenge of realistically what these probabilities are going to be and what is it that makes them meaningful. Is it a big value? Well, then we're going to have to go for a larger scale, right, of something you're talking about, kind of what SPC does today to even try to get those, within 25 miles of a point, you're trying to make it meaningful. You might have to go bigger. And I think that's actually what the Weather Channel does, right? To get to Torcon, it's within 50 miles of a point. That's how they get something that's a 1 to 10 scale. So and that's something that's very attractive. We might think about doing something similar.
Well, I'm glad James is not here because the Torcon would make his head explode if we talked about it. We know he's not there now, so
because he's about to go on the air, or his head would have exploded with that, I'm sure.
Brian, time is just flying. What is this?
It's coming up on 10 o'clock in Central Time.
Oh, okay.
It's crazy.
That's why.
So, yeah.
That's why I can't figure it out.
Well, I'm sorry that we didn't get to have Bill Bunting on tonight because he's talked about some amazing changes that are coming up at the SPC here in very soon time frame.
He's right over there. We
can
could
have
get
him
him
on before tonight's over. Yeah, that'd be great if he's not tied up. Yeah, I don't want to pull him away from any discussions. But thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us. You're the are you the MIC, the WCM, the SU? What at your?
I'm the Science and Operations Officer.
Outstanding.
Yeah. And before Jeff runs away, you mentioned the University of Memphis playing football the other day. Go Tigers! I graduated from the University of Memphis, and Jeff and I have a connection. Jeff and I. He was one of my instructors at the University of Memphis in our fledgling meteorology department. And I'm just sitting here looking at Jeff thinking, you look exactly like you did back in 1990. What the heck, So.
Yeah, Rick and I do go back a long way. And so, we both started our careers at the weather office in Memphis, too, as far as National Weather Service. And I had the fortune to have him as one of my students.
So. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Jeff. So
that's
really
wonderful.
cool.
Well, thank you so much,
cool
Jeff. Wonderful, both of you.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Jeff.
Thank
We'll have
you.
you back on the show sometime soon.
Great.
So, appreciate you joining us. All right. Well, that was some great information. That's what's happening here tonight. That's what Pat and Greg and the whole Ron team have put together. You know, it is an effort to, you know, foster this communication and networking. And so, of course, the man who needs no introduction to our group is the other Bunting, Mr. Bill Bunting, the branch chief of the Storm Prediction Center. Bill,
that just doesn't sound right. The other Bunting. I don't know. There's something about that.
When you work for Janice, you understand that.
Yes. Yeah.
And we all work for Janice.
I asked Bill a little while ago if he'd seen his wife today, and he said yes. They've passed a couple of times in the darkness and the night.
Well, this citizen police thing that she seems to have taken. Did she tell you, Bill, that she once wanted to be one of Charlie's Angels? Did you know that?
That's news to me.
Okay, good. So I asked her,
great being with you guys tonight.
which of Charlie's Angels, and she couldn't remember, but
she won't remember saying.
I think we don't need to give Janice a gun. But Bill, I tweeted out after yesterday because you're leading off and Carbon, and I'm like, this is why we do the NWA. This is why we pay our money to come to this every year. Because just, you know, if we'd stopped right after you and Greg yesterday, we would have had a great conference. And it's like, you know, 50 times more still to come. But talk about some of the great things that are happening at SPC. There's some real new products coming in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree. This is a great group. You know, we all have sort of a similar mission. We're all operationally focused. It's a family feeling, and it's just great to see everyone. And it's good to be here this week. You know, at the SPC, we have this history of making progress in areas, whether it's introducing probabilities, whether it's making forecast and analysis tools available on our website. We don't stop, but some of the new things that we're working on have taken time to do the research, to develop the guidance, and we're doing that. Our goal is to be more specific in terms of the time dimension. You know, it's one thing to say there's a moderate risk of severe storms over this part of the U.S., but when is it most likely? What are the greatest dangers? The advent of convective allowing model guidance, along with the knowledge of the storm environment, can enable us to make probabilistic forecasts of what's the likelihood of a tornado, and potentially even how strong might that tornado be well in advance. The guidance that we're developing shows promise. You know, like all guidance, it's not perfect, but good guidance with forecaster expertise, I think, really will allow us to make great progress in the next few years.
Talk about how you came up with a 4-hour window. That was interesting. Bill.
There was some work done by Harold Brooks and his graduate student, Mackenzie Krochak, looking at the percentage of severe weather in a given point across the U.S. that would be captured in a 4-hour window. And it turns out, for the overwhelming majority of the United States, a 4-hour time frame captures 93% or higher. And so we felt pretty good about that being a time frame that would have value from a local standpoint to narrow it to a 4-hour window, but also something that we could do skillfully on a routine basis. And so that's why we're going with 4 hours.
Well, that's really helpful, because a 24-hour outlook, like, you know, because I have an app, my one, that puts out the outlook as part of its product every day. It comes out at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it says you have a severe weather threat for the next 24 hours. Well, that doesn't really narrow things down. So I was really thrilled to hear you talking about that.
Trying to get more specific in space and time. The guidance that's becoming available is very helpful. We've just got to extract that information in the most effective manner possible.
So you talked about probabilistic tornado intensity forecasts too as part of your discussion. Just brief us on that a little bit, Bill.
Tornado intensity forecasting is incredibly challenging, and we all know that even when the large-scale environment doesn't look particularly favorable, if you get the right conditions and just the right space and time, really bad things can happen. And so from an SPC standpoint, the more skill we can develop in that area, the better. We have a database, a very large database of tornadic and non-tornadic storms, both supercell and QLCS storms, that we can use to calibrate some of the environmental and some of the storm attribute data that we're getting from models. And we're trying to turn that into skillful guidance. And so far, the early results are that this does show promise. So we're excited about that.
That's really cool. Kim, did you have a question?
Oh, well, I mean, I just, before you walked in, I'd been talking about how hard it is to get things resolved to really small spatiotemporal scales. But, you know, the work that you've been doing there, and that Harold and Kenzie have done, you know, narrowing things down to that time window has been very successful. So this is an opportunity where you can narrow things down, and you don't have to reduce any of the quality of the information people are probably looking for in terms of those high probability values.
Right. And if we can pin it down in space and time, I think that just gives people more confidence to take the right action before the storm, you know, begins to get close to their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Now, a subject that's near and dear to James's heart is outlook collaboration, and you mentioned that in your discussion.
Yes, it's a work in progress, and it's something that we take seriously at the SPC. Over the past year and a couple of months, we've had over 900 documented instances of collaborating with local weather forecast offices. Most of our focus is on the higher threat days, enhanced, moderate, or high, because the impacts tend to be more significant. But we are continuing to work on ways to share the outlooks that we're preparing before we get them out to the world, so that local offices can see what our thoughts are and we can have a chance to talk about that. I think better collaboration tools will help, but we're definitely moving in that direction.
And you were talking about the fact that June through October tornado prediction is different.
It's
in
definitely
some ways
more challenging in the heart of the warm season. It's some of our forecasters that have been there for decades have noticed that the techniques that work well in March and April don't work so well in June or July, and we're really at a loss to explain why. We've done statistical analyses of lots of different variables, and it's hard to really say what the answer is. If we just look at this and this and this, we'll have the answers. Now, we've had cases where we've had really high values of, say, the significant tornado parameter, discrete surface-based storms, and there are no tornadoes, or maybe perhaps something that's very weak and short-lived. So there are many areas of active research in meteorology, certainly operational meteorology. So if there are folks out there listening that are considering a career in meteorology, lots of questions. We need help with applied research and answers to help make the forecast and the warning process work more effectively.
So you're going to go to explicit hazard probabilities for tornadoes, wind, and hail on the day 2 soon?
We're working in that direction. We're going to be starting some internal efforts at that to try to make sure that our forecasts have skill. We'll verify those forecasts, and then at some point we'll make that operational. And then, I think the future will just be that there will be a demand for more and more specific forecasts farther out into the future. And, we're up to the challenge, but we want to do it reliably and with skill. And that's why we're going to take the time to really develop the guidance before we make it available externally.
Well, you continually get the question, about the wording and slide, of course, and you had a good answer for that.
Right. Well, words like slight, moderate, and high have been around for almost 4 decades. And so if you make a change to something that's been around that long, you really want to make sure the changes are in the right direction. Communications specialists tell us there aren't 5 words in the English language that have unambiguously clear meaning from low to high threat. And in fact, even numbers are somewhat ambiguous. What's the highest threat? Is it level 1 or level 5? So it's a mix of words, colors, numbers, and eventually icons. All together with robust training and awareness, we can make our risk communication more effective.
Well, it's always fun to see you appear on a national news network somewhere, Bill. And I say, I know that guy. That's just awesome.
It's usually something really bad's happening.
That's true. That's true.
If I'm on TV, it's bad for somebody.
They give you these buttons when you get to the NWA, and they say, do you want the tornado button or the hurricane button? I'm like, what's the most benign button you have? Do you have a fog button? Because I hated tornadoes already, and now I hate hurricanes.
Aviation.
Subsidence.
Oh yeah, subsidence. If we had a subsidence button. So Brian, this week has been nothing but picks of the week. I will never go lacking for picks of the week, and I think I got like 7 off of Bill's talk yesterday. But Bill, thank you for being here, and thanks for being part of this tonight. I hope we didn't hold you up long tonight.
I've enjoyed it.
It's been awesome, and thanks for bringing the tripod.
Glad to do it.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure.
Bill Bunting, the branch chief at the Storm Prediction Center. I hope I got that right. Branch chief, is that the best? Is that operations branch? I'm pretty close, something like that. So. There you go. All right, I'm learning something all the time. Thank you, Bill, for joining us. All right, we continue to roll along tonight, and we continue with Bruce Jones from Midland Radio, our great friend. Bruce, are you around there? Come in here and speak to us. You are rounding up this amazing research. Listening, you're like the ears. You're like the Russians looking over the. You're the Kaspersky software of the NWA.
Holy mackerel! There's going to be the Russians in WeatherBrains pretty soon.
It's great to be able to listen in on these conversations, because this is where new ideas are born, and it's. I think Daniel's got some interesting things to share with you guys.
Well, I've always wanted to meet you. Daniel Neatfeld is with us now, and Daniel, tell us what you do.
Sure. I work for NOAA and the Office of Atmospheric Research, specifically Global Systems Division, where we do a lot of tool development for forecasting and warning activities.
So talk about OAR for a second, because we hear that term all the time, and it's a very important term, and it plays into it's a very important part of the organization. Talk about what it does and what that acronym means. You said it just there, but say that again.
Sure. OAR, or Office of Atmospheric Research. And we really, we exist to support the National Weather Service. Again, we're part of NOAA, and we're trying to build tools that support operations. So if a forecaster is providing information to customers and users, we're trying to give them tools and a toolkit that they can help provide that information.
That's really cool. So you were talking tonight with your, with your colleagues about improving 5-day forecasts and how to improve or communicate uncertainty. Talk about that for a minute, about some of the ideas that you heard, some of the opportunities for research that you identified tonight.
Sure, yeah. The group that I was with, we were talking about impact-based forecasting in general. So it was all hazards at all different times, and we talked a lot about how if you're communicating something that's in the next few minutes versus how you're communicating something in the next few days, for example, 5 days, that's a pretty different conversation. And so a lot of it really was about having that conversation with the user and what that conversation could look like and what kind of information you can provide and what they understand. And a lot of people don't understand numeric probabilities, but they might understand most likely, or this is the earliest we think it'll start. So we're trying to really play the role of a translator and to really help them understand what that impact might be.
So take us inside the table that you were at as you were talking tonight. Who were some of the other, folks that were there?
It was a great discussion. Most of the people were in operations. Most of them were in forecast offices around the country. And it was great because they had shared a lot of different experiences that they have. One individual talked a lot about all the different impacts in Chicago. And you can just imagine the aviation impacts. Just such a large population, moving a lot of people around, that there's a lot of impacts to discuss for sure in a big metro area like that.
And a lot of weather in Chicago too.
Yeah. Well, this makes me, I'm wondering, have you heard of the Weather Service's desire to put together something called an impacts catalog? And if you've heard of that, I'm wondering what you think of that endeavor. Is this something that you can catalog, and how can it be done?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, we had one individual who's instrumental in putting that together. So it's great to have his insight. I think that it's a great effort, and it's an attempt to organize what's going on out there in the country and what weather thresholds will impact those events. How does the forecast match up to them? So I think it's a good effort to again, try to organize how we're doing our impact-based forecasting. And I think it's just getting its legs up from under, getting its legs underneath it now. And it's got a ways to go. It's still kind of early in the development stages, but I'm excited for it. I think it's a good project.
So talk about what impact-based forecasting means for someone who's not in the Weather Service or, sort of on the outside of things. What does that really mean?
That's another great question, because it does mean a lot of different things. It could mean, we were talking about in the interest of aviation, if you've got a wind shift or cold front coming through, that might make the runway configuration at Chicago O'Hare change entirely. But it could also mean you've got a big outdoor concert event. You've got some thunderstorms that are popping up to the west and moving that direction, and the people need to know what time they're going to hit and whether they need to close down or operations or not. So, it's really a lot of variation in what that actually means.
Or it could be in fire weather forecasting, and you've dealt with this in Oklahoma, Rick, with a wind shift behind a front or whatever, changing the orientation of a fire.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we and a lot of other offices have dealt with that kind of thing. We're providing that detailed information getting that detailed information to those fire crews is just as life-saving as a tornado warning or anything else is, because when the wind shifts and what was the head of the fire is now, going in a different direction, then yeah, you've got big trouble if you're not aware of that. So there's definitely big impacts.
Mm-hmm. And impacts can also be very locally determined. So what's an impact and very impactful in one place might not be in another, which adds a really interesting wrinkle to this. I was talking with the Sue from the Flagstaff office at his poster tonight, and he was talking about how they just issued their first heat advisory over the summer for an event that was going to go over 90 degrees and only cool off to the 50s overnight, but no one in Flagstaff has air conditioners. Right. So, you know, an event that in many places in Oklahoma, that's a normal day. But we basically live
Tuesday.
in, right, that's Tuesday. That's Tuesday in December. I mean, we live in ice boxes of air conditioning, and you have to think about the populations and what does it mean to them.
Yeah, after I went to Flagstaff, I realized that's where I want to retire, I tell you, because that looked like my place for sure. And this leads into a discussion about IDSS and how important that's become to the Weather Service. And Dr. Uccellini talked about that today in his discussion, the importance of the Weather Act and how we all need to go and read it because, you know, that really sort of legalized that process, which technically was not covered in the law, but is a huge part of what the National Weather Service is doing now and is critical to us adding value to the equation. So comment on that for a second.
Sure, and that's exactly right. I mean, I think a lot of people will tell you that forecasters have been providing DSS in one form or another for many, many years, but it's great to put some structure to it and you know, give it a framework, give it some training behind it. And I think that those are things that forecasters have really been looking for, and they're getting it now. So I think that the DSS training is about to roll out nationwide.
It's big.
Yeah, it's a lot of training.
We thought we took a lot of training for the satellite. The IDSS training that's coming, if you go through the whole thing, is going to make that look like kindergarten.
Let me get one of you to identify what IDSS means. So that people
between the two of us, we'll see. Impact-based decision support services.
Woo, you win.
Woohoo, you get a prize.
NOAA acronym badge.
I just, you know, people use acronyms and we don't often define them sometimes, and other people don't understand what those are. We throw them around, but we know because we know them most of the time.
Just sound like we know what we're talking about. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for pointing that out. So when Bruce drops the note, he said that you discussed credibility, Daniel, and that's really critical, but what context did that come up in?
Yeah, and it actually goes back to a little bit of defining decision support services, and I think we talked a lot about trust, and if you were having that conversation with a user, they need to know that there's some credibility there, and ideally they would trust the relationship. If you don't have that, obviously it's quite a bit less of a relationship that you're really talking about. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Puts the human element into it, and it's more than just reading a forecast off of a phone. It's actually trusting the person that's giving it to you.
And that's critical to maintaining, you know, the value of the National Weather Service when in an era of cutting governmental budgets.
Right.
And things like that. It's pointing out that. So it's really fortunate that we've gotten to a point where that's critical to our emergency managers because they trust one source generally. We've seen examples where maybe governors come behind the scenes and maybe say something they shouldn't say and get called out for doing it. But, you know, especially when the forecast was right.
And it's hard to have those trusting relationships. I mean, Dan used to work in the forecast office not that long ago, and it's hard to have those relationships if you're halfway across the country. I mean, those relationships don't develop by themselves, and they don't develop overnight. The ability to pick up the phone and call an emergency manager, or for them to hear in your voice how concerned you are, takes months and years and meetings and conferences and workshops and lots of work. And there's a lot of groundwork that goes into that, and it doesn't just happen. And people in the local forecast offices, the SUs, the WCMs, the forecasters are all doing that. And that, you know, none of that happens by accident. And it's a lot of foundational work that goes on before that event. And you can't just flip a switch and say, here, trust me, I'm a weather person, and here's what I'm going to tell you. That has to grow over time.
Yeah, it's meaningful. I mean, those people know that if you drive 2 hours out to their site, to their county, have that conversation with them or help train them, it's really meaningful to them, and that's how you establish that relationship.
And so communication is also critical. You identified some opportunities maybe that communication could be improved. in your discussions tonight?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the conclusions the group came to, is at the heart of this, it's communicating risks, and again, having that conversation and trying to speak their language, and just trying to tell them how it is, and again, in a way that they can understand it and influence their decision making.
Let me ask you a question too. Due to staff shortages in some places, and due to the fact that the WCM can't always travel out to those places, do you think that there's a serious problem when they can't, and they rely on internet training, like for spotter training, instead of going out and being able to talk one-on-one with the people out there? Think that has a bit of a detrimental impact?
Sure, I think it does. I think one thing that does happen that I've seen in offices is that everybody pitches in. If the WCM can't make it, sometimes there'll be a forecaster or two that'll try to get out. I've even seen electronic technicians and IT people go out just to, again, establish that face-to-face. But yeah, if it all goes to remote type of training, it's less than ideal. Hard to shake hands over the internet.
Yeah, yeah. Even though you can see the person if they're using some sort of interactive go-to-meeting kind of thing. Yeah. I was concerned about that because I've seen it in a number of offices where, like the secondary tornado season, they don't do any on the road. They only do online training, and that's kind of worrisome in a way.
Yeah, it's probably better than nothing, but
and what we've tried to do in our office is to provide the storm spotter training, and we do a lot of remote training, but we also try to get back out into the communities and do other types of interactions. So instead of going to the community and pulling into town at 6:30, setting up the projector and the laptop and talking and rushing back home, maybe we're able to go at 10 in the morning where we can meet with more of the hospital people, the school people. So that's been my goal, is to do that. We haven't done enough of it yet, but the face-to-face is important, but those contacts are really critical. And and it really is critical too for somebody besides WCM to do it. I mean, historically that's what it is, and that's in a lot of offices, that's who the emergency managers have that relationship with and know. But we're really trying, and I think throughout the Weather Service, we're trying to expand that and we're doing everything we can to get our forecasters out of the office and get people to know. I don't do any of the real work in my office. People just whisper in my ear and tell me what to say, and I say it. So I want the emergency managers to meet the people that really do the real work and that are really making that forecast, and that they can call them at 2:00 in the morning when I'm not there and get that information. So
although recently,
an issue across the Weather Service.
Although recently some of the staff shortages have prohibited, if the WCM can't get out, then that means that a forecaster might not be able to get out too. So
if there's staff shortages, then you have to.
All bets are off then. Yeah.
Well, it seems like in the emergency management community, the forecasters at the Weather Service become sort of little heroes, and to see those relationships get taken out beyond National Weather Service chat and into the field, pressing the flesh, and that has to be not only a valuable thing, but a rewarding thing for the forecasters too. Because the weather is we're seeing more and more, it's a people business, and I'm glad to see that happening. So I thought it was interesting to hear some of the discussions about, and I've been in the middle of this, so it's made me really rethink, because I probably, supported, 50, hotels during landfalling tropical cyclones. And so a big part of that decision is the owners don't want to close the hotel. And, they want to stay open if at all possible. And so, you always end up with these edgy situations, like in Jacksonville, where you had a hotel in the evacuation zone 2, and you're reading the NHC products and the storm surge probabilities and all of this and making decisions based on it. It's really scary to me, because you have to plan for the worst case scenario, because it often does happen. And so communicating that worst case scenario properly and getting that message across is difficult, because you still see people, that are ignoring that. And so it's made me rethink my position, even though it works with the timing process. So comment on that, Daniel.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it comes down to the nature of weather forecasting. And sometimes this is scary to think about, but the worst case scenario is beyond what you communicate. And we talk about having the envelope of solutions, and you think that you know how bad it could possibly be, and then once in a while, it's even worse than
that
you
black
thought.
swan event shows up,
Yeah. So it is important to make sure that you've communicated everything that you think that they need to be prepared for.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to meet you finally. Thank you for everything you're doing, and good luck with all the future research that'll come out of tonight, I hope.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Kim, why don't you introduce our next guest?
Yeah, well, we've just been joined by Matt Solom off to my left, and he is with the Weather Service working with USGS to better forecast mud flows. That's a part of the conversation that you've had tonight. And you're the Western Hydrology. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, I'm not a hydrologist by any means, but I do work in our Western Region headquarters in Salt Lake City. Mainly working in our Western Region headquarters, Regional Operations Center. So kind of just overseeing all of the weather in the West and a lot of the impacts that we've been seeing. The main topic that we were discussing over there, and we did have a good contingent from the California offices, and we were talking about the 2016-2017 atmospheric river events that we had there, and mainly in the January-February timeframe. And some of the questions that we were talking about were relating around who owns mudslides. You know, we were talking about Weather Service, USGS, and I think we have a really good handle on post-wildfire debris flow and working with the appropriate partners for that. But getting beyond that, with all the rain they had a large amount of mudslides, landslides across a good chunk of California this past winter. With the January, February rains, and then we saw the Highway 1 along the coast there near Big Sur had a huge landslide. They're not even talking about repairing that until next year at a minimum. So,
wow.
So, we had some good discussion around who really owns, outside of post-wildfire, who really owns like modeling, looking at the soils, things like that. So it was a really interesting discussion around that. So, and trying to figure out where do you go from there.
So, yeah, that's outstanding. So the event in Big Sur was really a phenomenal event then. I mean, that highway's still closed, or have they been able to work around it?
As far as I know, it's still closed. And like I said, it doesn't sound like they're even going to be able to get in there till next year to even test or tackling that. So at a minimum, I haven't talked to the Caltrans folks or anything like that, but that's what I've been reading.
So you said there is this challenge of responsibility. Who owns mud flows? Can you talk a little bit more about what was the Weather Service's piece of that? What was their sort of side of that? And then where did their clear boundary end? And where did USGS see their boundary, coming up and meeting that?
Yeah, so with this very active winter we had, I'll just speak on California, for example. Most familiar with that just because that was a lot of our focus, even though, it did spread up the coast a little bit further. But so we were monitoring the radar, the observation stations throughout the winter, and looking at webcams and things like that. And we were putting out the appropriate flash flood warnings for suspected debris flows, landslides, things like that. But also looking at the river gauges and putting out more longer term flood warnings for rivers that might have gone up. And so that's kind of where our responsibility lies, is getting that warning and working with emergency managers and the core partners to make sure they have as much notice to get the word out to everyone else that they're working with. So, yeah.
So Matt, atmospheric rivers have become a really sexy term. Yeah. That term's been around for a while, but now that we have all these wonderful TPW products, that help us see them, and visualize them, they've become really fascinating. So what are some of the research opportunities that you identified tonight in relation to those?
Yeah, we did have one gentleman from the Radar Operations Center over there that deals with QPE, looking at radar estimations of precipitation. But he said that was looking at that out west is a huge struggle because of the beam blockage, the mountains that we have. Radar coverage isn't that great out west in some areas because of the terrain compared to central and eastern portions of the country. So then we got talking about the satellites that we're we just had Go 16, and looking at, even though that's going to be off to the east side of the country, eventually we'll get a similar one out west here, and being able to try to develop products and algorithms using satellites and things like that to kind of offset some of the radar challenges that we have out west here with estimating rainfall.
Well, just call Anthony Yanez at NBC in Los Angeles,
Right.
and he'll let you borrow his mobile radar.
That's right. Yeah, that was yeah. He had a good intro this morning. Yeah. So,
Hey, Matt, talk kind of changing topics a little bit. You said you work at the Western Region Regional Operations Center. Talk a little bit about what a ROC is, what the Regional Operations Center does, and what role they play in weather service operations.
No, that's a great question. Great question, Rick. Each of the regions have some sort of regional operations center. As we go forward in the agency, the weather service, they're going to become more established. Out west, we've been fortunate to have some staff step in and fill that role over the last few years. But internally, we're providing basically situational awareness to our regional leadership, but we're also providing support to all of our offices in the west. Whether if they have equipment issues that they can't fix locally, they'll reach out to us and see if our regional staff can help out with those. For these bigger events, these bigger high impact events, like especially with the atmospheric rivers that we saw this last winter, we'll facilitate coordination calls with the offices, local offices, with the national offices, Weather Prediction Center. We even have had some cases where we've had to pull the National Hurricane Center in, get some moisture feeding up from some decaying tropical systems off the Pacific coast there. So doing coordination calls, making sure everyone's on a coordinated, consistent basis with the forecast, not only internally, but also as they're briefing their partners. We also collect high impact event reports for the larger impacts, fatalities, damage, things like that. And we forward that up to our National Operations Center up at Silver Spring there, and that's how they use that information to brief national leadership as well. So that's kind of the internal piece. But similar to the weather forecast offices out there, we also provide support to regional partners at a bigger scale. So those partners that have larger footprints than a local office per se. And so the examples of that is FEMA, EPA, the regions. So we support from our operations center, FEMA Region 10 up in Seattle, and also FEMA Region 9 down in Oakland, primarily, and the associated EPA regions as well.
Does that include the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service?
We haven't established too much of a relationship with them, but we have made some contacts with the Forest Service, not as deep as what we've had with FEMA and EPA, though. But yeah, that's definitely pretty.
I would think you would have in the Western region with with so many national forests. And is the Boise, is that in your region or is that in Central?
No, the Boise is in our region.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the fire center there.
Oh, National Interagency Fire Center.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I was thinking of. That the Forest Service would be a great relationship because of fire, and that you mentioned mudslides being an area where there's this like fudgy boundary between Weather Service and USGS. Fire is another area where there's a big nexus of interagency support for that hazard.
It's kind of surprising you aren't already, kind of. Knitted with them because I mean I can see FEMA and others, but
local offices are involved in the Forest Service too. Obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think it's interesting too. I mean, the ROCs do a lot, but the ROCs haven't really been in existence very long. I mean, when I worked in Southern Region headquarters, I mean that was kind of where the first ROC was developed, and that's been like 15 years ago probably, and. You list off all the things that you're doing, and I was looking earlier at an email from our ROC talking about what's going on with the hurricane preparation, and I can't imagine not having them. So important stuff that goes on. People don't know about.
Appreciate that. And I'll give one other example that's not necessarily a federal partner, but a state partner. So one example, we also support the state of California as well, and the reason for that is there's 10 WFOs or weather forecast offices that have some portion of California. And so the state liaison office in Sacramento came to us several years ago saying, hey, we're kind of getting overwhelmed with these bigger events. We're trying to support our local partners, but also the state doing state briefings, emails, and things like that. And so they reached out to us to see what we could do from a regional level. And so we tested some things out for a few years, and now we're providing routine, consistent services from Salt Lake for California. We provide weekly email briefings to them on Wednesdays, and then anytime there's a weather event, heat, flooding, things like that, that meets their certain state criteria, we'll get on and do live briefings for the entire state. So
that's what Southern Region does, the exact same thing for Texas,
Yep.
because there's 13 WFOs that service Texas. So that's how it all started.
Yeah,
that really was the foundation.
So that's I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're doing similar for California.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for the invite.
for being part of the run.
Yeah.
And we'd love having you back on the show again sometime.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a great night and a great rest of the conference.
You too. Thank you.
All right. See you soon. Brian's holding up some sign that says it's 10:30. I don't know what that means. It's only 8:30 here. So, I mean, we could go for another hour, Brian.
Well, we're already probably established the longest WeatherBrains episode ever.
I think we've got 3 minutes to go. So I say we go for the record. What do you say?
Absolutely.
Well, just bringing up Gary Satkowski's new terminology for PDS. He changed it from particularly dangerous situation to, do you remember what he called it?
Partner something syndrome. I can't remember the
Yeah, partner derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
I thought James would appreciate that.
He would have, yes.
He said retirement doesn't apparently be agreeing with him at this point, because he's been a little mouthy since since the retirement checks started coming. But he's defending forecasts that are correct.
Yeah. Well, and it's a situation where it's a lack of knowledge that's creating comments that are very detrimental.
They are.
They really are.
They undermine confidence.
Brian. They do. Yeah. And when you hear your governor talking bad about some agency that you don't know much about, because the Weather Service, despite the fact that it's does a lot, it's still, to the average person walking on the street, they don't know much about the National Weather Service. So,
and I do want to point out, talking about good forecasts and accurate forecast. If you remember last week's show, I forecast that it would be very cold at the conference, and there would be people complaining about how cold it was.
I quoted you several times.
Today.
Yes, it did. You should have issued a warning.
Well, I did issue a warning. It was a PDS. Particularly dangerous shivering was going on. So
you've heard it first on WeatherBrains. PDS has a lot of meanings.
Rick, you probably have you can probably tell me what this is, but Greg referred to an essay table yesterday in his discussion.
Yeah, I think that's
something about interpreting model guidance when it's outside the extreme value level.
I think it's a dashboard to kind of look at some of the different models and how far above certain levels that they're forecasting. It's just a visual tool to say, if a lot of models if the consensus of models or ensembles are starting to agree on some extreme rainfall event or something like that, it's kind of a visual tool. I don't know all the details about it, but I know we use it in our office. We have forecasters that look at it, and it's just something another way to kind of gauge what are the models pointing to here. Are they pointing to something that's going to be one of those events where you have to say, wow, it's a higher level event or something we haven't seen before.
I really think we should have another show on Thursday night. Brian, are you good to go? Maybe have another recap show? He's looking at me like I'm crazy.
That was enthusiazm.
Yeah, just remember, when all this closes down, I got to put all this equipment back together.
I thought it looked like daggers. Really. But I enjoyed Dave Nussbaum's talk about the New Orleans tornado, the East New Orleans tornado. And I thought something that was interesting, James always says, the viewers look at the Doppler radar on television and think it's a bucket of spilled paint. He sort of had a different opinion, Brian. He said, their readers I say readers because we have the blog, but he said that their audience came back and liked that and appreciated the showing the correlation coefficient and the velocity.
And I think that may partially reflect the wide level of knowledge that the public has, because I'm sure that James is absolutely correct. There are some people that look at that and they just can't make heads or tails of it, and yet there seem to be other people. And of course, down in that area, there's an awful lot of NASA folks, and so the level of education has got to be pretty high with that. So I would expect folks there to be a little
and
more.
I think to some
knowledgeable.
degree, I just realized this thinking about, his conversation, and that was that, James, part of the situation in a stressful deal like that is to lighten the situation. And that's probably, Brian may disagree with me totally, but I think that James has a unique way of, maybe lightening the tension a little bit when it's a serious situation, but, you don't want people to freak out. I thought that Josh Eachus, is that right? Josh Eachus from LSU and WVRZ and Baton Rouge, his talk about analyzing tweets was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
We probably should have him on the show soon.
That would be great.
Kim, did you see that talk?
I missed it. No, but I would love
you were
to hear a
probably in
little
the
bit
student
more.
session
Yes, I
yesterday.
was.
It was in the broadcasters. I
Yeah.
guess instead of picks of the week, maybe we can give a favorite takeaway from what we've seen in the first 2 days. That's why I want to have another show Thursday night, Brian. He's laughing at me now. Okay. Kim, do you need some time to come up with a takeaway?
There's been a couple of interesting things, but do you have off the cuff a key takeaway already?
I've got like 1,000.
You have this amazing
I've got like all
pages
these
of notes.
amazing notes, because I think Brian Norcross's talk was interesting. He showed, of course, Brian is famous for, his communication during Hurricane Andrew in 1992, which was a very different time, of course, at the National Hurricane Center.
I didn't realize how different things were until
he
his
showed
talk.
it graphically.
I mean, it was really, it's much more different now than I thought it was. Or Andrew, things were much more different in Andrew than I thought they were.
Yeah.
The National Hurricane Center, by policy, did not use the models in making the forecast.
That was a huge surprise to me. I could not believe that.
That really floored me too, Brian. He said that they did see that the GFS was like 2 closed isobars, that hit Miami and New Orleans or southern Louisiana. So it actually was beginning to show some promise. But all the things that came out of Andrew, FEMA really changed. It didn't address natural disasters.
That was another surprise too.
And it took 4 to 5 days for there to be a federal response. And, that came out of it. Building codes came out of it. The insurance system collapse came from it. And so his discussions about, making generalizations about storms, I thought was important in terms of its messaging, and looking for single points of failure in your system, whether it's communication or, power or whatever.
Yeah, his story was fascinating about going to the different radio stations and analyzing the paths that the signal would get to the towers,
especially when they thought they were very secure, and he pointed to 2 or 3 canals that they had to go overhead to get over.
And they were like, oh,
yeah.
I met Brant Miller, who's the chief at WMAQ in Chicago, and that was fascinating. We need to have him on the show sometime very soon. I just sat down next to a person who was, by himself at a table yesterday, and I'm like sitting next to a legend. And he and James have a lot of similarities. So James, Brant says hello. He said he came up to you in Birmingham and said he had never introduced himself. James is back. We all need to put our earbuds in.
Yeah, okay. Now we can hear him.
We all have to listen now.
I used to listen to Brant on WLS radio in Chicago a long time ago. So I'm a fanboy going way back.
I became a huge fanboy just sitting next to him, and got to spend the day with him yesterday, and that was so much fun. It's amazing to see the flood of information now coming out now that we've been getting trained on GOES-R for at least 7, 8 years.
Feels like it.
And now there's just a flood of information, and it's wonderful. All the different near infrared bands and things that we have available to us. So I'm probably stealing people's talks, but I'm going to say one more thing, and that's what Richard Mamrosh was talking about with the WVSS program and getting data from the 135 Southwest Airlines and UPS planes. There's some amazing sounding data that is going to be available to us on the web in October. And I think this is going to be a game changer on severe weather forecasting day.
We use it a lot. We use the ACARs and a lot of this. The
TAMDAR and all those things.
A lot of that. It's you use what you have, and it's helpful.
So Scott Martin wrote in tonight, James. They've been playing a drinking game back in Alabama for acronyms, and they passed out about 9:30. So,
brother, wow.
The first break this morning here.
So yeah, you wouldn't make it very long here. But James, for our picks of the week, we're just giving takeaways from this week. I'll turn to Rick Smith and say, Rick, do you have a favorite takeaway?
I've got two. One, Louis talked today. He mentioned something about we're making history, or we really are changing. And I was talking to one of my friends who's a TV meteorologist back in Memphis, and he said he's been coming to a lot of these, and he feels like things are moving, and it's not just the same thing over and over. It is, there seems to be this growing agreement and about impact-based forecasts and warnings and things like that. So I thought that was interesting and kind of hopeful, and that maybe this stuff is working, and maybe we're going to move forward and make a difference. And the other thing that really hit me hard, and I think I know Brian was sitting there. I said, we have to have her on the show, is the last talk yesterday from the lady about the solar
space weather.
I'm already getting a cave. I heard that the talk was so scary that
really?
I'm getting a cave.
It was scary.
I'm going to build one of those old civil defense underground bunkers.
It was fascinating, and she went over on her time, and it was the last talk of the day,
and nobody left.
Nobody left, and people were still asking questions. I said, "Wow!" But it was.
So I talked to her. We're going to have her on the show.
Yeah,
I'm really excited about that.
Irma, for example, there were some significant solar flare. I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but solar activity that severely disrupted amateur radio communications, satellite phones. I mean, we're just a little bit away from, even the fallback communications
when they
technologies were close to failing. They lost aircraft. I mean, like they couldn't.
Yeah, for like 45 minutes at a time.
Tracking aircraft. This is like scary. Morgan Freeman movie kind of stuff.
Okay, now I got chills. All right.
It was that kind of talk. It really was.
Maybe
I'm gonna. As a matter of fact, I think before I take off from here on Friday, I'm going to check the space weather forecast and see if maybe I should just take a cab home.
Yeah, we'll just rent a car and drive home, Brian.
So anyway, that was eye opening to me. I had no idea any of that was happening. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And James, I have the answer now for Kevin why the National Weather Service can't have an app. We'll share that next week.
I'd like to.
Okay, cool. And Brian, I dropped my pick in the chat room. It's
I got it.
Yeah, everybody's just blown away by the GOES 16 images tonight of the eye of Maria coming into Dominica. It's just horrifying. And again, there's a lot of good GOES 16 sites, but somebody within NOAA's put a good loop of it up on YouTube. So that's my pick of the week. But hey, guys, this is a great show. I wanted to step back and let y'all have it. We had great guests. The audio, Brian, was second to none. Greatest remote we've ever done.
Kim, did you have a takeaway real quick before we let James go home? He's got to get in bed.
Nope. Well, I'll just make it really quick. There was a great talk given by a graduate student in communication media at UT, and he said social meteorology isn't as bad as we think it is. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, we'll let him walk a mile in my shoes.
Brian, do you have any last minute stuff you want to add? Good.
I think my big takeaway so far was what Rick mentioned about the space weather. That's been the most eye-opening talk to me of all the dangers we face that I had no idea that we face from the sun, which also provides our atmosphere with a good deal of warming and niceness. So,
and she compared what she's doing to what Harry Volkman did back in the early days of tornado warnings, where he was at Channel 4 in Oklahoma City, and he was getting these tornado warnings passed to him secretly by the military, and he was the first person to put them on the air. And she's like, it's anyway.
Well, James, thank you for this opportunity. Everybody here has said hello to you and wishes you were here.
A lot of friends are there, and I will do my best to make it next year. But thanks to all the great show. Brian, thanks for engineering this, and to Kim and Bill and Rick. Thank you guys. Y'all go have some fun now. It's still early out there in the West Coast. All right.
If you say so.
So let me kind of wrap this thing up here. Find the right music here. Here's the deal. If you want to watch, typically we're live every Monday night at 8:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, live.bigbrainsmedia.com. That's how most people watch. Of course, we know most of you listen to the podcast version. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address is email@weatherbrains.com. Aubrey will be back, I think, next week. So we'll do a long email segment. Our social media accounts are on the website as well, plus all the show notes, weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. God bless.
And thanks to Pat Spoden for being here tonight with us, and Greg Stump for inviting us, and the entire Ron crew for having us on the show tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Bye-bye.